My name is Kavitha Kapadia-Mansko, and I'm the founding director of the Urban Teacher Education Program here at the University of Chicago. And it is my distinct pleasure to invite all of you to our annual Master's Project Presentation Day. We're here today to honor the students in Cohort 11. So over the years, our program has come to view today's event as a really important pause in the never-ending, ongoing journey of becoming an urban school teacher. Today provides us with a space to reflect on the roads that we've traveled together, celebrate one another's accomplishments, consider both poignant and powerful moments of learning, and above all, it is a moment for us to come together as a community to wish our students well as they transition into the critically important work of being an urban school teacher. In the spirit of making today's transition, we've asked students to assemble multimedia narratives that represent some of their most significant moments of learning while they were with us in UTEP. Cohort 11, in just a few minutes, you'll have an opportunity to stand right here before your peers and your friends and your families and share your stories of learning with us. This learning has both been emotional and intellectual. The learning has been individual and collective. This learning has been full of joy. It's raised a lot of hard questions. And perhaps at moments it's felt a little bit jagged and uncomfortable at times. Of course, the learning is deeply personal in the way that authentic learning should be. And we're eager today to hear your personal stories of learning and reflect with you, of course, in UTEP style, on your stories of hope and transformation. I also want to take this moment to acknowledge that while you've been taking your own individual and collective journeys, that our program has been taking a journey of transformation with you. Your questions, your deep commitment to our mission, your unwavering demands for excellence, your own critical hope have not only been inspiring, but from my point of view, they've been perspective altering. You've made us interrogate who we are. You've made us interrogate where we're going and why. And I'm convinced that we are better teacher educators today because of the journey that we've taken with all of you. And I want to thank you for that. And for all of us, as I said at the outset, our journeys of learning are never ending, so by no means is our journey with you, Cohort 11, coming to an end today, but it is definitely taking a shift. Today we go from calling you our students to calling you our colleagues. Today we call you teacher. And with that title of teacher comes an immense privilege and responsibility that I know you'll treat with great care. So today, on behalf of all of Team UTEP, I want to congratulate you, Cohort 11, class of 2015, on becoming teachers. And with that, I think it's appropriate that we share some of this applause with the people that have been your teachers throughout this journey. And I'd like to ask everyone that is part of Team UTEP to please stand up. All of you. day together. I'd like to introduce to you Dale Ray, who's part of Team UTEP. Brian Ray, no relation. Can you guys just wave? Thanks. Joshua Thurby, Rita Nelson, Jeanette Bartley, and their director, Doug O'Rourke. Okay. As I said earlier, the title of teaching comes with great responsibility and care and privilege. And I'm deeply awed by the way Team UTEP, Team Secondary, has handled your responsibilities of developing this group of teachers. You've done so with great responsibility and great care. And I thank you for all of your contributions to their journey, but also to our program. Thank you. Cohort 12, our first years are in the audience. I'd like you to raise your hands, right? Although today is about cohort 11, we need to acknowledge that you were there just a year ago. And it goes by fast, doesn't it? Cohort 12, enjoy this day and be looking forward and be thinking about what it might feel like to be standing up here and tell your stories, because we'll want to hear those. And I want to wish all of you congratulations on getting very close to the end of your first year in UTEP. And families and friends, I know you've been called on for a great deal of support throughout Cohort 11's experience, and you can expect that next year the calls of support will be about 100 times more. Be there for your friends and your sons and your daughters and your family members. There's nothing like the first year of teaching, and we must pull together and get through that hurdle that lies ahead of us. But in the end, Cohort 11, I know that you will prevail. What you've showed us in your journeys together is that you are strong, and you have powerful voices, and you have deep conviction, and I know that you'll be successful. So I wish you all congratulations again, and I wish all of you a wonderful day.
Good afternoon. I'm Jeanette Bartley. I lead the biology section of the secondary program, and along with Doug O'Rourke, we teach the second year of the program called residency. So I really got to know these 12 teachers really well. I'm really excited to be here. They're our 5th graduating class. Yay. And as with all graduations, this one for me is very bittersweet. When we began our residency year, I really didn't know this cohort as well. In the first year of the program, I'm their academic advisor, so I don't really have a real connection to them until the second year. So when we started second year, I got very excited because I got a chance to get to know them and really figure out who they were as pre-service teachers and who they were going to be as teachers. But I will say that in my 16-year teaching career, this cohort has taught me what it really, really means to be a teacher educator, and a human. And so I want to say thank you for that. So as always, I entered this year with an agenda and purpose. I wanted to give you all everything. I wanted to teach you what it really was like to be an urban teacher. Because of course I know everything, right? So I wanted to make sure that I imparted that to you, and I do not. I had the year planned out based on how things have gone in previous years. And because I didn't really know you all, I made a lot of assumptions about what the year was going to be like. But it did not take long for you all to prove me wrong. I often tell my students that their own students won't learn from them if they don't trust them or believe in them as teachers. My words came back on me tenfold this year. Because of some of the past experiences that this cohort had, we started residency here in a very strange place. And I know you all know what I'm talking about. So we had to restart and learn to trust one another and learn again how to support one another, and to understand that we are not perfect. There's no such thing. As a cohort, you all made us question if we were actually living up to UTEP's mission of preparing high caliber teachers to teach in CPS and to be the change agents that we want you to be for our students. This was the ultimate learning experience for me as a teacher educator, and most importantly, as a human. And because of this, you all have pushed me beyond what I thought I was capable of. I know that even as teachers, we learn from our students, but you all gave me so much more than I ever expected. I am grateful for the pushes and all the pushbacks, the many, many questions, and there were many, and the experiences that you all have given to me and to us as a program. This cohort of students has really helped me to realize exactly what our mission at UTEP looks like in practice, and I thank you for that. As much as I have learned from you, you have learned a lot as well. Through your experiences, you have come to truly understand that teaching is humanistic, that we are humans before we are teachers, and that's something that we need to remember always. You now understand what it really means to fight for your students and to show them that you care about them as a whole person and not just as a student. And you now understand and may be very sick of hearing about what split vision really means. You have grown so much over the past 2 years. You are more mature, more confident, and you're coming into your own as urban teachers. And because of that and who you are, I am not the same teacher or person that I was at the beginning of this year. More often than not, I think that we as teachers learn more from our students than we expect, and if good teaching and learning are taking place, then that's the way it should be. So I want to thank you, and I want to say thank you to this cohort, to this community of teachers for continuously pushing and challenging me in the program, for pushing us to do better and to be better, and for an insightful 2 years. I am proud of each and every one of you. I cannot wait to visit you in your own classrooms. I can't wait to hear all the stories, and I know they're going to be a lot, the good and the bad, but I'm so excited for what lays ahead for you. So with that, congratulations, and I can't wait to see your presentations.
All right, good afternoon, you guys. How y'all doing? All right. I'm trying to get the nerves out right now. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. My name is Aisha Crockett, and I would like to thank you guys again for coming to our graduation presentations. It's very important to us that we have family and friends to support us throughout our journey. So with that, let me go ahead and get started. My presentation is entitled Finding My Voice, and you'll see why I said it a little later on. I'll be manually clicking through, by the way. All right, so quick presentation outline. We're going to be talking about something called a Danielson framework for teaching, and within that we'll talk about something called domain focus and a problem of practice that I had throughout my student placement. We're going to go ahead into a point of reflection. We're going to talk about something called backwards planning. We're going to talk more about my experiences as a student teacher this past year. We're going to go to the also necessary portion of the existential search for my future self. And then we're going to end it out with acknowledgments. And really quick, I want to acknowledge right now my shoes for letting me get up to this podium. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so I told you guys that we're going to talk about the Danielson framework for teaching. So that's a way for students, or teachers, my bad, to really assess their progress as teachers. So this is a very useful tool throughout our entire UTEP, our entire time in UTEP. So with this framework, we really got to know who we are as teachers and how we can even improve our practice as a result of the Danielson framework. I don't know what I'm trying to say. All right. So this is the candidate assessment form, which is part of the Danielson framework for teaching. So this kind of looks pretty tame right here. So this little worksheet. but note that this is about 10 pages long, and it isn't even filled out at that point. All right, so this is a very intricate process that you have to go through, but as a result, you get to learn a lot about you and your practice and how you can further it as a result. Okay, so there are 4 domains in the Danielson Framework for Teaching. I'll be talking about one of them today, which is the classroom environment and learning community. And there, the Danielson Framework also breaks down the domains into components and then elements. So the component I'll be talking about is managing student behavior, and my element will be providing clear and consistent expectations for my students. So, the problem of practice, so something that I was dealing with really heavily this past year as a student teacher is how can I become very confident in my teacher voice and use it to create an environment that's productive for classroom learning. All right, so we're about to talk a lot about me, but before we even do that, let me talk about y'all real quick. So we're going to do a point of reflection for everybody in here. So like Kavitha said earlier, reflection is very important in UTEP. So how about we reflect all together? So for 10 seconds, I want you guys to think about this question up front. All right, so in one word, describe your favorite teacher. So I'll give you guys 10 seconds. Start thinking, all right? All right, 3, 2, 1, are we done? All right, so let me get some volunteers to shout out the answer. Shout it out.
Strict.
Strict, okay. Inspiring, thank you, young lady. Creative. Caring, fabulous. Love, awesome. So those are some really great words. So now it's not about y'all anymore. About me. So there's something that we do. We're going to put those words on pause for now. So there's something that we do in UTEP called backwards planning. It's part of this toolkit that we use called Understanding by Design. So essentially, backwards planning, has anybody ever heard of reverse engineering? Maybe some people in the audience. So reverse engineering and backwards planning, you have a goal in mind. So you backwards plan from that goal, and you think about all the steps you have to take in order to achieve that goal. And this is really important when you want to unit plan, so when you want to come up with a unit for your students. And you have to think back as far as having a goal in mind and thinking backwards as far as what should I do in order to make sure my students achieve that goal at the end of the unit. So that's essentially what backwards planning is. All right, so I talked about it in the context of unit planning, but I want to talk about it now in the context of who I want to be as a teacher. So the question that I had in mind is how do I want my students to describe me? So you guys came up with some really good words. So strict, caring, love, inspiring. My voice is shaking. All right. So how do I want my students to describe me? So I had a list of words, but nothing can really encompass what I want my students to describe me as better than this picture right here. So if you want to know who that is? Recess. So up there is Miss Grokey. So she was an elementary school teacher for all the little 4th graders in Recess, the TV show. All right, so she was actually one of my inspirations for becoming a teacher. She was a black woman being a teacher on a cartoon show, kind of a big deal for me as a little kid. So Miss Grokey was a very important influence for me. She was very caring, loving, confident. She was very firm in the guidance that she provided for her students. She was also convicted in her beliefs, and she wanted students to find their own voice and be their own advocates. So that's one of the reasons why she was my inspiration for becoming a teacher. And I'm crying over a cartoon. All right. So that's just Grokey. So returning back to the present day, we talked about backwards planning in terms of how I want my students to describe me. So this is a question that I really had to ask myself this past year as a student teacher. So during my placements, how would I describe myself as a teacher? So how was I throughout my student teaching? So this is the only word I could really come up with. Inconsistent. Hey, you notice the inconsistent lettering, okay? So I was very inconsistent, okay? And you're like, Miss Crockett, you seem like cool people. You ain't really inconsistent, is you really? Yeah, so, and I have reasons for why I said that. All right, so I didn't know what type of teacher I wanted to be in front of the classroom. I went between either extremes. I was either a super strict teacher, really stern, kind of mean, or on the other side of that, I was pretty laid back, chill, kind of hipstery, do what you want, you know what I'm saying? And then finally, I would not have the same reaction for the same behavior. So for instance, if a student were to like throw a piece of paper across the room, one day I'd be like, you need to pick that up. You know, the next day I'd be like, you know what, do what you will. You know? It just depends on how I was feeling that day. All right. So my first placement was at ACE Tech Charter School. ACE Tech is architecture, construction, engineering at high school. So that was my first placement. And I really found that I struggled with who I want to be in front of the classroom. So that's why I said struggle with thyself at ACE Tech. So like I said, UTEP had us reflect a lot. And this is one of my journal entries, me reflecting on how I was in the classroom at ACE Tech initially. So at the beginning of my placement, it was just mainly observation. So I was just watching my lead teacher, Ryan Palmer, who was pretty great, teach the class. And with that, I was, at that moment, I was trying to build relationships with students, make sure I knew who they were. I was trying to be engaging, fun, interesting. I was trying to figure out who they were and what their lives was about. But as soon as I got in front of the classroom, it completely changed, you know? So I became the person I did not want to be. And that's basically what this journal entry is like detailing. All right, so let's do some role playing, all right? Okay, y'all good? Y'all looking at me. So I'm gonna be the teacher. I'm gonna be at Miss Crockett at ACE Tech when I first started teaching from the classroom. And y'all be my students, all right? Good morning, class. I said good morning, class. All eyes will be on me today. Do not talk. Please pay attention. We have a lot to get through, all right? Silence. Silence. And sing. So that was basically me and ACE Tech in the beginning. Okay, just because I was like, oh my God, I don't know how to teach. You know? I was kind of freaking out because that was like the first time all the responsibility was on me as a teacher, and I had to make sure that my students learned. So that was kind of like a nervous breakdown from the classroom. So actually, I think I have a picture of me at ACE Tech. A student took that for me. So this is, does anybody know who this is? Miss Finster, right? So she was also on recess, but she was like a pretty strict kind of mean teacher. So I found myself being her instead of Miss Grokey. Okay, and I realized that was a problem really quick. So Ryan, my CI, Mr. Palmer, he told me that, look, I know that isn't who you want to be in front of the classroom. You need to be more authentic to yourself, and it's clear that you're not comfortable as the person you are right now as Miss Finster. So you need to basically find your true self in order to make sure that you have a classroom dynamic that is fair to you and most importantly, your students. So after that, I did a lot of reflection, and then I realized that, you know what, Mr. Palmer, he's kind of right. So I think from that point, I was able to be more confident in who I am as a person. And as a result, I really figured out there was like a 180 in terms of how students responded to me when I was being Aisha. And also, students they catch on really quick. They're really perceptive. So every time I would try to be Miss Finster, one student said, "Oh my God, why you act so old?" You know what I'm saying? And then another student, they said, "You can't tell me what to do. You a baby adult, you know." You recognize my youth, so I couldn't do that. So okay, there we go. So after I realized that I wasn't being Aisha, I really made some changes pretty quickly. So by the end of my placement, I was able to really come into my own as far as my teacher voice was concerned. I was much more engaging with students. We had a great time, great discussions, conversations, and not just about biology, about their own personal lives. So I really felt that grew the classroom environment to something that led to a really positive learning environment for everyone. This is basically the journal entry that reflects that. All right. So at the end of the ACE Tech, I was pretty, cocky with it, you know what I'm saying? Like, I got this now, you know what I'm saying? Students like me, I'm good people. So my next placement was at Juarez Community Academy. So, all right, okay. So at Juarez, what ended up happening, I became a little bit too comfortable as the cool person. So I took one step forward at ACE Tech and 2 steps backward at Juarez. And these are the reasons why. So I never set up expectations with my students in regards to behavior or schoolwork. So it was just a free-for-all, you know? And also, I wanted to be the cool, hip teacher. Therefore, I didn't want to discipline students just because I want to make sure they like me. Lastly, like I mentioned earlier, I inconsistently addressed student misbehaviors when they popped up. So this is an observation that my CI at Juarez took. So I want you guys to note all the underlined parts. All right, and that's how, when I'm trying to be the cool, hip teacher without any expectations or norms, that's what happens in the classroom. That's how it manifests. So as you can see, a lot of students don't have a workout, they're tapping on desks, other students have to monitor their other students' behavior. Even if they had their workout, they weren't doing it. So, and then they're walking around the classroom, talking to each other, not really paying attention to me. So that's really how trying to be the cool, hip teacher without any norms or expectations built up. That's what happens in the classroom. And it's kind of chaos, but in an unproductive sense, all right? So what I figured out is that I go in between two disparate styles, so autocratic versus permissive. And there are three main styles that UTEP talks about, so it's autocratic, permissive, and democratic. So I never really hit the democratic point, but that's something I'll be working on. But as you can see, autocratic is on the left, and permissive is on the right with all the characteristics. So autocratic is basically like your dictatorship classroom. So you tell the students what to do, very little student input. It's all you or nothing. And that's who I was at the beginning of ACE Tech. I tried to become more democratic at the end of ACE Tech, then I skewed all the way to permissive. So students could do whatever they wanted, they ran the classroom. So it didn't really work out for anybody. All right, so in the future, I'll be searching for my democratic self. So near the end of my placement for both ACE Tech and Juarez, I really realized that like being autocratic or permissive really isn't very productive. So I want to make sure that I always find a balance. So I'll become democratic in my teacher style. So that means I'll provide firm guidance and leadership for my students. I'll foster a positive learning environment, and I'll make sure that they know the norms and expectations so students can choose which behaviors they want to suit their best interests. All right? So to close this out, I wanted to tell you guys that my students were pretty great, so I had a lot of feedback from Jeanette, from my CIs, and from myself, reflecting. So my students actually gave me the same feedback that I gave myself. Why am I so nervous? So the first piece of feedback is improve punishment and become cold-hearted. Second one thing I need to remember is improve the way you have attitude. So have attitude towards students, right? I don't know. Also, you can't be too easy on kids. They'll walk all over you. And my favorite piece of feedback that my students gave me was nothing. She's just good like that. So I took that one with a grain of salt. All right, so we're closing out. Don't worry. And also, this is a piece of feedback that I got, which is was one of the most important to me, because this is a girl who I thought hated me the entire time I was at Juarez. I was either too strict, or then I was okay, you can do whatever. So I just thought she knew I was inconsistent, and I just thought she really disliked me, and I'm very sensitive to how students feel about me. So this is actually what she gave me before I left Juarez, so that was a really important piece of feedback for me. Her name is Diamond B. I forgot her last name, but it's Diamond B. So actually no. Names have changed, don't worry. That was for a couple people involved. So this piece of feedback was very important to me as a teacher. I thought I failed so many times, but students are very forgiving. They know you make mistakes and it's okay because they're in this with you, and that's something that's very comforting to know. And in the future, a few things I'm going to work on when I have my own classroom next year is making sure students know that there will be norms and expectations, and they'll be able to put their student input in there. Also, being consistent with how I address behaviors if it's necessary, and creating a space for student feedback so I can incorporate those changes to meet the students' needs, both socially and academically, and most importantly, I want to have fun in my classroom. All right, so that's basically the entirety of my presentation. We're going to close out with acknowledgments like I promised. All right, so acknowledgments. I want to thank everyone who has been part of my journey at UTEP, and there's a lot of you guys, so not everybody's name made it on the board. But firstly, I want to thank all my instructors, Jeanette, Doug, Jenny. She was my graduation, the summer camp we had. Ryan, Nicole, all my students, all my other instructors, so Josh, Brian, Tina, Rita, Diane, Melissa, everybody who I had a chance to learn from. I grew so much from it. And the main shout out to my cohort 11 folk. All y'all names are up there, y'all can read it. And let me see. Good luck and congratulations to cohort 12. Give them a round of applause. And I think this is the most important one right here. A very special thank you to Miss Yolanda Martin. Who's that? Right there. I love you. I know I love her, but where's the cut? I love you all.
Graduation ceremony. And here at UTEP, like Kavita and Aisha have already mentioned, we like to reflect. And I think at the end of our 2 years here, this is a really great time to look back at the beginning to see how far we've come. And also, like Aisha mentioned, to measure growth, one of the main tools is the candidate assessment form, the CAF. And there are 4 domains. The domain that I chose to focus on today is instructional delivery. And the question for my problem of practice is, how can I engage students in learning by creating interactive activities and assignments? So that's where we're going to focus today's presentation. And yeah, this is an example of an early lesson at Dunbar, and I'm attempting to teach rate of change to my freshman Algebra 1 class. And, well, we all have to start somewhere, so.
It travels a little longer, this whole line. So, this is 125 and we do right. But now we travel a longer distance from this point to this point. How many do you travel? Well, yeah, it's done. That's the speed. Okay? Great. How many seconds it takes?
Engaging, right? Please don't answer. Yeah, but it was early lessons like this that really caused me to reflect on how to make my lessons more engaging for my students. And don't need anyone to tell you, but lectures are boring, right? Lectures are boring. But revisiting many of the authors that we had to read over the course of the 2 years at UTEP, and also talking with my mentors and also my amazing cohort mates, they really helped me kind of solidify my thoughts on how to authentically appeal to students' interests and have interesting anchoring activities where we actually get the blood flowing, get students moving, and have the students do cognitive lifting so that we can equip them for the process to answer a question that they want to answer themselves. So something that's important to them. And here's an early example of a worksheet that I made where we were trying to go over area and perimeter in the Algebra 1 class at Dunbar, the same class. And what I did here to try to make it a little bit interesting for the kids is I took an image off of Google Maps of their school at Dunbar, and I superimposed some rectangles on top of it. So I want to know, okay, if we have a little legend that converts inches to feet, can the students find the perimeter of the entire school and the area of the entire school? And, what was a good idea? We can see how much room I left for work. I see all the work down in the the margin over there. So, while the idea was there, the execution could have been a little bit better, but I feel like it was a little bit engaging. One of the students on the right found that he would actually take just a little bit over 8 minutes to walk around the entire school. Pretty cool, big school. And here is another example of an activity I tried to make engaging for my students. And it's called a popcorn and soda problem. And the question for this one was, okay, well, if we go to the movie theater and we have $20, how many different combinations of $4 popcorns and $2 sodas could we buy? Well, I had students answer this question by working through it and doing 5 different math representations. So in this one, I was trying to engage students in learning by having many different ways students could answer the problem. And while I feel like I did okay, probably can't make that out up there, but the equation is not exactly what I was looking for. So reflecting on this, I really could have done a much better job at equipping my students to actually find that equation, to discover it. But yeah, this is just a worksheet though, so it's not exactly as interactive as it could be. Okay, now that's a little better. So getting the students up to the board, that's one of the strategies I tried to use over the course of my 2 placements, and getting them actually doing the work, really gave them ownership over the work. So, and that ownership really helped them internalize and learn better, and that's something I will absolutely be taking with me. Okay, and moving on from Dunbar to Ace Tech. At Ace Tech, my clinical instructor was Daniel Bortnick, and I think he's in the crowd over there. Hey, Daniel. Yeah, he was awesome. So he really taught me a bunch of different ways of creating engaging lessons and activities, and stuff that could have been done much more traditionally, just on pencil and paper. Well, he showed me how to incorporate movement and all different types of strategies into activities like this. So in this video that we're about to watch, we have 4 guys and 3 girls, and they are trying to answer the question, okay, if we have gender-assigned seating at a movie theater, how many different ways can all of these students sit down? So here we go.
So what I'm going to ask you guys to do now is stand up and stand behind your chair. We're going to figure out how many different ways we can do. Okay, yeah, so we can sit down. So now if we have this first chair has to be a guy, has to be a male. How many choices do we have in this first chair? 4, right? So there's 4 choices of guys in this first chair. So how many guys in this first chair? There you go. Everyone sit down. Okay. All right, great. So now for the second chair. So only one is in this chair. So specifically, how many choices of females do we have? 3, right? So there's 3 choices right here for this chair. Now how about this third chair? Who's in there? Just that. Great. So John. How many choices do we have? John? Yeah, we have 3. Active? No. Okay. Now for this next chair, how many guys do we have left? 2. Okay. So we have 2 choices. And we have more than one mistake. Great. So now we have 2 ladies here. Okay. So we have 2 choices of lady. Great. Then we have any choice for this last woman and last male? No. So great. So these are the choices of ways for each of the individual chairs. But so in some of the kind of combination probability problems that we've done, when we have different ways of combining things, what operation do you think are between these 2 numbers? You know these numbers? Multiply. Yeah, it's multiplying. So 4 ways times 3 ways times 3 ways times 2 ways times 2 ways times 1 times 1, and we get
easily could have been done on pencil and paper, but I think that the interactive element really kind of gets the students remembering this problem and it becomes more emotionally salient. So I think this is a powerful lesson I'll take with me. And also at Ace Tech, Daniel, I was really kind of thankful for, the fact that Daniel allowed me the freedom to create these different interactive activities. And here's an example of, or a few examples of some of them. So the Monty Hall problem. This is the classic game show. Some of you guys may have heard of it. This is what I used to introduce the probability unit to the students. And this was pretty fun. So the students got to play in a game show and had a good time and got to actually make choices where probability was the salient decision-making criteria. And in rolling the dice, we contrasted theoretical and experimental probability by trying to answer the question, okay, well, if we roll 2 dice, what's the sum of these 2 dice going to be? And we did many trials and compared those experimental probabilities to the theoretical probabilities. In permutations of poker chips, we ordered different poker chips and saw how many different ways we could put some number of things into different orders. And this was cool because we had different roles. And one person was ordering the chips, actually handling the chips, and the recorder's job was to record the data, but also to organize it in a way that kept, made it easy to keep track of, and also organize so we could find a pattern. And finally, in the $40 coin flip, students got to see if, how much they want to wager to risk the opportunity to flip this coin, and they got to test their conjecture experimentally. Okay, but I think the most engaging activity was probably this find the height of the Sears Tower activity. So in this one right here, what we're about to watch, we're about to see students using what's called a clinometer, and it's just a little protractor that has a straw taped on it as a sight, and there's a string hanging down with a plumb bob weight, and in this case I used a poker chip, so I brought some of myself in there. So students right here are gathering data to try to find the angle of inclination, and we're going to take this data inside and then use it to make a trigonometric calculation. So here's them gathering data. Spot that line over there. Yeah, so you're looking right at the top of the Sears Tower? Okay. Okay. Yeah, so that was, so I feel like that was a lot of fun for the kids, and Ace Tech, it's right on State Street, so they see the Sears Tower every day when they go into school, so this is a question, some of them had, and we actually got to gather the data experimentally, which I feel like is pretty powerful. And in this clip right here, all the groups of students who are gathering data with their clinometers, well, some of them got different angles. So we actually had all the different groups of students go up to the board, and then they did their own trigonometric calculation. And, well, we saw, okay, some of us got different things, and this is a debriefing of that process.
Spoiler, I did look up the height of the Sears Tower on Google already, and they revealed the actual height of the Sears Tower is 1,729 feet. So, who got the closest? Yeah, you're fine, you got the closest, bud. So, right here, the actual height of the Sears Tower, from looking on Google, 1,729 feet. And Stefan's calculation was 1,798 feet. So that's pretty cool, right? And now for the the other people got different angles. That's wrong. Well, so the tool that we use wasn't very precise. So what could have gone wrong for a the height of the person? That's something that's interesting to consider. Okay, so the angle could have been off. Why did the angle been off? Yeah, when it was long, that's a really nice thing that really good thing to point out that also affects the measurement. Okay, are we going to be able to get a really precise idea of looking at exactly the top before looking for a straw? No. Okay, great. Any other sorts of areas you guys can think of? Yeah, that's another really good one. So we could be moving and not get an accurate reading like that. Okay? No, that's really cool. But this is a really interesting thing to note that, yeah, you can actually use a tool like this and get really close to the actual height of the Sears Tower using trigonometry. So great job today, guys. Great job.
Yeah, now compare that discussion with the discussion from the first video. Night and day, I hope. And I really feel like the experiential element of the gathering the data really kind of made the difference for this. And polling my students, apparently they would agree. So some of the highlights from the end of the year exit slip that I gave them were the outside activity with the clinometer, the game show, the rolling dice activity, the coin flip, and more generally, just hands-on activities or group activities where they got to work together and help each other out. And this is, even though I'm far from, I have a long ways to go. I have shown a little bit of growth, but this is absolutely something I'll continue to practice and reflect on as I continue my teaching journey next year at Whitney Young. So, thank you.
Already doing something else. Let's think about this in a way that it's pretty tangible for everybody, right? So imagine a time when you're trying to convince maybe your friend, your family member, somebody close to you that's just like laying out a little, right? To get up and do something. So you're trying to get them to do something, right? You get up, you're like, all right, we gotta go do this. We're going to the grocery store. We're going to get a haircut. I want to get my haircut. Should I take you to my friend Kara? She didn't want to come. Okay, that didn't work out that well. So I guess that transition for her was crap. But anyway, so you're trying to convince them to do something. What questions are they going to ask you? You guys can shout to me. Where are we going? Where are we going? How long is it going to take? Why are we going, right? Are you going to buy me something, right? Is there food? Is there food present if you're hungry, right? Yeah, exactly. I like what I'm doing now. I don't really feel like getting up, to be honest, Miss Wagner, right? And then second kind of question related to that is how are you going to convince them? Are you going to bribe them with food? Are you going to buy them something? How do you get people motivated to get up and join you? So, some questions, right, you guys came up with. What are we doing? Why is this important? Well, this was color-coded, but
this projector messed that up. Anyway, so what are we doing? Why is this important? When are we going to go? Do I have to get up now, half an hour from now? Do I have to get ready, etc.? What's in this for me, and why do you want me to go? Right? Why is it important that I come with you? So in classrooms, you guys probably picked up on this already. It's a period of time when the teacher will ask the students to stop a certain kind of activity and move to another, right? We're going from point A to point B, the transition in between. Specifically, you guys will hear about the Danielson, but anyway, here's a little bullet point about it. It's domain 2C, it falls underneath managing classroom procedures. And it can look kind of chaotic based on what your students are doing. If your students are moving from taking notes to reading, it's gonna be pretty easy, right? They just have to pull out a book or pull out a notebook. They don't have to get up and move anything. If they're going from a lab activity to coming through and, I don't know, now reading or group work or whatever, there's gonna be a lot of movement in the class, and it can get kind of chaotic. So why are transitions important? Well, there's a lot of in-between time here, right? There's downtime, which kind of leads to people talking, right? Even in between presentations, I'm sure you guys have been like, are they done yet? I need to pee. I gotta go. So this happens, right? Transitions are this time where we're like, it's a break, you feel it's a break, you're kind of tired of thinking, students start chatting, right? They might get up, they want to go to the bathroom, etc. And it can be kind of frustrating if you don't allot enough time for whatever task you want the students to transition to. A perfect example of that is like, say we all wanted to go downstairs right now. If I gave all of us 2 minutes, we probably wouldn't get there, right? You'd probably be pretty mad at me for only giving us 2 minutes. But if I gave you half an hour, then we'd probably get lost in the building because you know you have enough time, so you just won't get there. So to kind of rephrase our questions for the class, right? The what is the wait, what are we doing? As teachers, we hear this all the time. You get up and you're like, all right, we're gonna do this, this, this. And the kids are like, what? So you want me to do this? And I didn't have the sheet and I don't have a pencil, and they just kind of get lost sometimes. The purpose, we also kind of hear this, who cares about this? Do I really need to learn this? It's kind of frustrating to hear it, but anyway, so that's the kind of why is this important, why do we need to learn this? Time is why are we doing this? Personal gain, why do you want me to do this, right? And the expectations. Students know that teachers have very clear expectations for their behavior in the classroom, so they know that there's a certain set of criteria for what they're going to do, the how and the why. So what does this look like in practice? Some of you may know we spend a full year of tutoring during our first year here at UTEP. Personally, I tutored at UCW, which is down the street here on 64th and University. And it's one-on-one, so it's pretty intimate, right? Like you get to know your students really well, you counsel them through all their issues in biology, at least for me, because I'm a biology. I thought this would be pretty easy, right? It's one-on-one, do you really need to convince somebody to do something if you're sitting right next to them? It's not that hard, right? So it's like, all right, here's a lesson plan, I know what we're doing, check it out. Pretty straightforward, right? I also know when we're doing it and how long each thing is gonna take. It's like, all right, I got this. Expectations, boom, they're right there at the bottom. I got this, it's gonna be super easy. Except for the fact that I totally forgot that the kids are there, right? So in terms of purpose, explaining to them what they're learning and how it fits into the larger scheme of biology and their coursework, kind of fell off the table, let's be honest. And the personal gain, right? Like, why does the student need to learn this particular thing about an organ system? Why are cells important? What about this enriches your life and why this is meaningful or should be meaningful to you? But I got 3 out of 5, so I guess that's not horrible. My first placement was at Farragut, which is a school in Little Village. We, of course, get observed a lot when we're student teaching, both by our clinical instructor. Every single day they're sitting there, they're watching us. Someone will come from UTEP, they'll watch us, lots of stuff. One of the things that we get evaluated on is something called instructional delivery, which Stu spoke to a little bit earlier. And that refers to how the teacher communicates with everybody in class. Are they communicating clearly? Are the expectations set? Is everything good, right? So here's a comment from my clinical instructor. Kevin says, so students know what the expectations are. They know how they should be acting in class. But you totally forget to remind them when you're transitioning, right? This is that in-between time that gets kind of chaotic, and I failed to tell them, like, okay, Right now you should be seated, or you should be moving, or this or that. And I forgot to tell him how long. I forgot to tell him a lot of stuff, right? And that did not work that well. He also said try to decrease the number of transitions you've got in a single class period because we were just planning way too much stuff. And the more times you have downtime in the classroom, the crazier it gets, right? So I was like, all right, this kind of sucks. So now I'm down for 3, right? Kind of forgot purpose. Personal gain, I'm trying to get there, but not really. But now I'm also messing up on expectations. I was like, dang it, I'm never gonna get through this. But I was like, all right, what we can do is I can plan for them. I'll sit down, I'll script it all out. I got the transition, I got what I'm gonna say. This is gonna be awesome. I got this. Come at me, kids, I'm so ready. Except, how you plan things is totally different from how they go in the classroom. If you guys are educators or teachers or even parents, you have a certain plan lined out, and it doesn't always work out. So, Jeanette came and observed me, and she said, I see you planned for that transition really well. It was awesome. You had it all on your lesson plan. What happened? And I was just like, what? I was like, man, it was in the lesson plan. And literally pushed my face. I was just like, I can't do this, all right. So I reflected. I was like, okay, what am I doing here? I think I'm saying way too much, right? I think I was just I wanted to have the students have a clear picture, right? They know exactly what they're doing and how they're gonna do it, and I went and scripted all of it out, right? It's gonna be awesome. So if I was saying way too much, they heard a third of it, and of course it kind of fell apart, right? Realistically, nobody can remember that many things. Obviously, I was still struggling with purpose and personal gain, right? How do you motivate students to do something if they don't really see the clear interest that they have in this, right? And forgetting to reinforce expectations. Damn it. So, second placement, I was at Lindblom. And I started to think like, all right, so I'm saying way too much, I need to keep it short, clean, and sweet, right? We're gonna have only a short amount of time for transitions, even though it's a longer class period, but I don't want them to drag on as long as they did. So I thought to myself, if I have 30 seconds to explain what the students are going to be doing, which isn't totally realistic in a classroom scenario, but that'll kind of force me to condense what I'm saying. How do I get the main points across to them of what they're supposed to be doing? And how do I keep them motivated, that they won't start wandering around or poking each other or flirting or whatever, right? Because this is what happens in school. So I started making bulleted lists in my journal, which you can't kind of read because they're in chicken scratch. But anyway, so it's just kind of like, boom, 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 boom. This is what I want them to know. These are the most important points so that when this happens in class, I have a clear idea of what they want to do. And I'm not sitting here stumbling over my words. But I'm still working on it. So obviously, this is kind of a lot of stuff to get out and maybe a minute or two during class. But I think that these guiding questions are kind of helping me understand both like, how do I want to be as a teacher and the psychology of being a student, right? Especially students, high school students in the morning, you could give them $50 and they're just like, I just want to go to bed. Like, I don't want to move late. You really need to motivate them and understand what makes them tick. And that only comes through knowing your students really well. So I think all of this comes into transitions, right? How do you make sure the kids are on task, focused, they know what they're doing, but also that you don't stress yourself out and just watch your class go into chaos. So many thanks to everybody. If you're not up here, I'm not throwing any shade at you. I just feel like it's really late. So cohort 11, we've been through a lot. We're almost done, literally. Doug, Jeanette, Josh, Rita, Tina, Brian, our instructors, Diane, of course, for helping me figure out all these paperwork issues. My human family, my close friends, and my cat family. I'm back now.
All right, hello. Part of our assignment was we were tasked with coming up with one area of improvement that we've made over the course of this 2-year program, and I'm not going to do that. Cheating. There's a couple of reasons why I'm not going to do that. First is because when I reflected on how I've grown throughout those 2 years, I couldn't narrow it down to just one area. I feel like there's been so many different areas that I've been able to learn about that I couldn't settle on just one. The second reason I'm not focusing on one particular part is that I'm very uncomfortable talking about myself. And so instead I decided to focus on exactly what I've learned from all of my cohort mates. And so I think it's a testament to the staff. They talk incessantly about how important it is for our teaching to be student-centered and not teacher-centered. And when I reflected back on how I grew, I think it's a testament to them that my first thought was to think about my fellow students and how they helped me construct my own knowledge. Oops. All right, so I also managed to steal all these pictures from our first week in this program. So you can see how we grew physically as well. All right, so starting off with Stu, this is in alphabetical order, so no particular favorites. So Stu, establishing a culture of learning. So Stu, he's known throughout the cohort as being a man of many talents. I don't want to talk about his skills on the soccer field, in the pool hall, at the poker table, brewing beer. He's got all these talents. But what I really got from him was I was able to spend my first semester student teaching with him at Dunbar, and it was amazing. I was able to see firsthand the energy and enthusiasm that he brought to class every single day for 15 straight weeks. I don't think there's a single day when you weren't smiling and sharing that energy with students. You're always optimistic about their capabilities and their potential. And that was something I really took to heart. And you're also so reflective. You're always thinking about how you can improve. I think your own presentation showed how much you're able to grow in this as well. So I was really impressed by that, and that's something I wanted to take with me as well. So thank you. All right, Angelo. So knowledge of content and pedagogy. Angelo is famous for his incredible knowledge of everything having to do with biology. And to prove that, I didn't actually take any content-related classes with Angelo, and I still got to hear all about the incredible number of ideas for anything from evolution to biological systems to anything that they were talking about. And it wasn't just about his knowledge of the content. He also had all these ideas for how he would teach that. Whether it was introducing videos into the classroom or different sort of manipulatives that he would use. So that's something that I really took to heart from Angelo. I also just wanted to give him a shout out because he's the youngest member of our cohort, I believe. He started this program as an undergrad, and I saw a tremendous amount of growth in him. He was able to really find his voice, I think. One of the things he was able to do, he was able to speak truth to power, especially during our second year. And he held really fast to his beliefs. And I really respected that in him. So thank you. All right, Aisha. So one of the things I noticed about Aisha, and we actually talked about it, is finding her voice. I think one of the things you do is you go out of your way to give compliments to everybody in our cohort. And they're really great compliments, they're accurate. And I think above all, one of your greatest attributes is your ability to show respect to others, whether you agree with them or not. So you can agree, you can disagree with someone, you can hold your beliefs to yourself, but you can also respect their perspective on a situation. And that's something that is so important, especially when dealing with students, that I want to take with me. So thank you. All right, Fabian. So designing coherent instruction. So again, I didn't get to see you teach students that much, so I'm thinking about this more in the context of our own classroom. We got to both living on the north side, we got to spend a lot of time on the CTA together, traveling to and from U of C, and during those rides we became good friends, and it's something I will always treasure. And one of the things we talked about like lesson ideas and things like that, and you had this way of being able to synthesize an argument and asking me questions that were just things that I hadn't thought about, and you were able to, something like, John, students may interpret this question in a way that you're not anticipating, and it just made me think about my own lesson planning and how I might anticipate misconceptions and that sort of thing. I can't count the number of lessons that you helped me with, but I feel like these conversations make me such a better educator because of them. So thank you. All right, Russell. So. All right, so creating an environment of respect and rapport. So my first thought, and I feel like probably everybody who knows Russell's first thought, is that to an almost insane degree, Russell is organized and detail-oriented. And so I actually didn't want to focus on that because I feel like that's something that everybody already knows about you. So what I did want to talk about with you is first of all, how great a friend you've been to me over these past 2 years. And you're kind of what I think of as a connector. And by that I mean you're able to create and maintain relationships with so many different groups of people. And there's so much value in that, but whether it's alums, staff, cohort 12, the cohort 10, your CIs, I think you invited like everybody that exists, right, to this ceremony. And I think you have this philosophy of inclusion, and when you're talking about managing a classroom without bias, I think you exemplify that, and without showing favoritism, you give every student voice and respect them, and that's something I definitely want to take with me. So thank you, Lindsay. So engaging students in learning. So I feel like I can imagine Lindsay already as being every student's favorite science teacher. You haven't even gotten your own classroom yet. And I would always be really excited when Lindsay and I got paired up for an activity in our class because I knew she would bring this energy with her and come up with all these really fun ideas. And it's clear to anybody who knows her that how much she loves what she teaches. And I know this will be clear to her students as well. And so I hope I can exude the same love for math to my students as Lindsay does for science, because I think that that's so important as a teacher. So thank you. All right, Mike. So using questioning and discussion techniques. So Mike brings a lightheartedness to the classroom. He's always ready with a joke whenever we're in class. And his smile and his laugh are very infectious, and they always lift my spirits whenever I see him. But behind this lightheartedness, there lies this deep understanding of math that is really strong. And I remember during our first year when we had number theory together, all 4 math students did. Of course, I was struggling in it. And I remember Mike comes and sits down next to me, and he says, he asked me, he says, what do we know about blank theorem? And of course I don't remember the theorem because I'm not a good student. And so, I kind of stumbled through some sort of answer, and it's completely incomplete and not correct. And then Mike said, I think it's actually about this, this, and this. And of course it was exactly right and exactly what we needed to know for the final. So I appreciated that. But I didn't realize that, before he even asked the question, he already knew the answer. He was just sort of engaging me in this discussion. And I feel like that he has this patience and ability to kind of ask questions that force you to think. And that ability to allow students to struggle is really important and something that I try to incorporate myself. So thank you. All right, Alex. So, providing feedback to students. So, early in our first year, we had to peer review each other's essays for one of our classes. And I actually searched back through my emails because I remember I really liked the feedback that you gave to me. And you have this way of providing feedback that's that challenges whoever has the opinion, but without being combative or making someone feel defensive. So I think what you said, I actually quoted you. So you said, "I think your role in this paper has been reduced to that of background singer instead of the main act. I feel like you should insert more of yourself in your explicit opinion and let the authors be your background." And I thought that was a really nice way of getting me to think more about how I can insert more of myself into a paper. But it wasn't, again, it didn't make me feel defensive. It was just like a really nice way of pointing something out that I hadn't thought about. So thank you. And again, that's something that I want to apply when providing feedback to students, because that's really important. So thank you. Tasha. So demonstrating flexibility and responsiveness. So whenever we were given a prompt to reflect upon, I always knew what Natasha would think of first. And what she would think of first was, how does this affect students? And it was almost like, or I think it is a reflex with Natasha, and it's something that should be a reflex for everybody. But it's not. It's a really rare quality. And so I knew that she was thinking, how is what we're doing affecting the students? What is in their best interest? Are we meeting their needs? And especially as early teachers, I feel like so much of the time we get totally absorbed with ourselves and how we're thinking, and we forget to think about how it might impact students. And I feel like Natasha, she just naturally already on top of it and knows to think about the students at all times. So again, that's something I plan on stealing. So thank you very much. All right, Brady. So knowledge of resources. So Freddie loves cats, as you all know. Just wanted to get that out there. One of our assignments this year was to teach us, where we have to teach something that is not related to science or math to the rest of our class. And Verdi had us choose from an assortment of paintings and create a story using those paintings. And it was just one of many examples where you use resources that you had to create a really interesting lesson. Another example would be, I think several times you use the university resources to, for example, like scan a book for us, scan a reading so that we didn't have to buy the book, which is really nice. So a lot of little things like that. They're just very thoughtful and that add up to a big thing. And so using those resources, something that I struggle with. I don't often think about the resources that I have at my disposal. So I really appreciate learning that from you. So thank you. All right, Kara, initiating instruction. So one thing that stood out to me about Kara was that she was able to create excitement about the lessons that she was teaching. So in your Teach Us, you taught us about candy bracelets, which are like bracelets or plastic jewelry that are used in like house parties and raves and that sort of thing. And so that's like Kara's scene and something that I didn't know anything about. And so, first of all, that's awesome because it's not what I would think when I first met you. And it reminded me, we learned all about the rituals of like how you exchange candy between two people and what it's all about. And, I just assumed it was all about drugs, but it's not. So it's and so it was really nice. And it reminded me again, like when you open yourself up to your students, it creates a much more engaging lesson. And it's not just, because when I think of engaging, I think, well, what are my students interested in? And I don't think that they might be interested in me. And when you make yourself vulnerable like that, it really helps in creating this really supportive environment in the classroom. So, I think I got everybody. So that is my presentation. I also wanted to give a shout out to secondary staff, to Doug, Jeanette, Rita, Tina, Josh and Brian in secondary who have helped all of us so much. I think the work that you do is so important, and it's kind of bittersweet, this ceremony. As most people know, the secondary program is ending after cohort 12, and it's bittersweet, and it's I feel like I would be remiss not to call that out. The education of teachers is so important, and a program like UTEP is doing all the right things, and it's a shame that profit in this case seems to be more important than education, and I don't think it should be, and I just wanted to name that. And again, just to thank you all. I know you're all in your feet, but I really appreciate it, so thank you.
Welcome, good afternoon, welcome back from the break. For those of you who don't know me, and I guess for those who do, my name is Mike. And I want to take you on a little journey that helps answer this question. Why does math matter? This is something that I've had ample opportunity to reflect on over the last 2 years and more. And it's something that is pretty important if you're going to be a math teacher. One might say it's half the job description. You got math, and you got teaching, right? If I understand the ratios in that. And this is really for me about, and I guess maybe you can read it, I don't know, the font's not great. It's really about how I relearned to love math. Before I can take you on this journey of reflection, it's probably worthwhile to take you to some kind of starting point. That starts with, why do we like things? Well, first of all, I really like math. Maybe pathologically so. It's something that greatly interests me and is a primary factor for why I chose this profession. And how did I decide that I like math? It's because I got good grades in it. Simple as that. Right? I was a little kid, do a lot of work. I didn't particularly like the work, but I did it. I got a good grade and I felt validated by that. And that's why I got into physics. Well, that and Dad sitting in the back. Physics is really interesting. If you take a course in quantum mechanics, you'll convince yourself that multivariable calculus, complex analysis, and linear algebra are all critically important things. And I suppose if you're a physicist, they are. To 99.9% of the population, who cares, right? Pretty much useless. Well, I won't say that. There are some people who would object. But it's something that, by and large, does not have use to most people. As an undergrad, I didn't particularly care. It was fun to me. And the University of Chicago did little to dispel me of that notion. They have a saying at UC, that's all well and good in practice, but how does it work in theory? They even sell t-shirts. And so, of course, in this environment, I didn't really learn to value the usefulness of things. And in fact, with friends, we'd often joke about this. Here we have a relevant XKCD. I don't know if you can read that from where you are, but the joke goes that each of these sciences, from the left to the right, are all just applied versions of the next one over. Of course, you have the mathematician here. Oh, hey, didn't see you guys all the way over there. And so my friends and I, we would joke that mathematics is something that's very pure. And that was something that we really valued about it. And it's very playful and fun. It involves a lot of creativity. It's something that, if you're that sort of person, it's something that is enjoyable, strangely, in and of itself. Oops. Uh-oh. Here we go. This here, and I guess it didn't really scale very well, is part of a proof that 1 + 1 is equal to 2. As it turns out, this proof is beyond my abilities. This is a very small excerpt from a 300-page proof. Right? 1 + 1 is equal to 2. Very easy in itself, but the mathematics behind it, very difficult, but also very beautiful and fun. It involves, well, I see Russell. It involves a great deal of creativity, and that's something that I really value. And so, that's what makes somebody like Homer Simpson my kind of guy. Right? Here we see him in one blackboard disproving Fermat's last theorem and completely changing topology. That's a math joke for those of you who are interested, right? So really quite incredible. And so, with this notion in mind, I had a clear vision coming into this program of what type of math teacher I wanted to be. I wanted to teach kids the right way. I wanted to build and instill in them the foundations for how to be a true mathematician. I was going to give them the real math experience. And so, that's how I ended up like this. This is a mathematician at work. I was speaking total gibberish. I had not given my students a reason to care about things that were completely beyond their abilities, and in fact, barely within mine. Maybe I need to go back to the drawing board. Right, math joke. So from the starting point, I had to totally rethink about what mathematics is and what it could be. I had already developed this love of mathematics from a perspective that my students do not share. And so I had to rethink about this problem from my students' perspective. Why should they care? Why is this something that's important? And so one of the things that I had to think about is, how do I make this interesting, right? I took for granted that math is interesting in itself, because it was to me. I enjoyed just doing math problems, weirdly enough. And so there are some ways better than others. My first attempts probably looked like this. It's hard to find that. Right? Nobody's buying this. Right? This isn't going to work with anybody. So I had to do some work here. I had to grow in this sense. I had to try to make the mathematics, the things that I'm teaching, authentic to my students. Make it something that's useful to them and that they care about. And in fact, I'm not even using the correct language here. Make isn't quite the right thing to say, because it is. Math is useful. It is interesting. But I had to find the ways that it is. And that's a major part of my job description as a teacher. But here I am, from my perspective, wondering about this question, the one that every student asks. Are we ever going to use this? And for a while, from my perspective, my answer would have been no. You'll never use math in real life, ever. Obviously, that's not true. Nor could I possibly believe this and be a math teacher. It's a complete paradox. It's sort of a crisis of, an existential crisis. And so I had to change my view. And I had to find meaning, right? Not only for my students, but for myself. Why is this math important? Why is it something that my students should care about? Let me check my notes here. Can't remember why it's important. as it turns out, there are a large number of reasons. But this finding meaning, that meaning making, using mathematics and making meaning of mathematics, going in both directions, it's one of the key components of being a teacher. And as it turns out, there are a great deal of things in which mathematics are useful. And so, sort of what I discovered by taking my students' perspective, by interacting with them and learning from them, is that math is something that is actually very powerful. Not only does it help you to interpret the world, but to act on it. In those previous examples, there's an election poll. There are data about income and per capita GDP. There are a lot of very important issues which mathematics can empower students to become agents in acting on those issues. And so it was through this perspective taking, through interacting with my students and learning from them, that I relearned how to love mathematics, not only for what it is, this playful thing, it's a creative, inventive activity, but also for what it can do. And so it's this new perspective that's really recommitted me to this profession. And so for that, I'm extremely grateful to my students and for those in the program who have helped me along this journey, right? The staff, my classmates. But as with any teacher, I've got some homework for you to try to show you my old side, and maybe, hopefully, someone interested. This is not an easy question, and I'll leave it to you to ponder. But please write it down if you're interested, and then work on it on your own. Okay. Thank you very much for your time, and it's been real. Oh, you did? Don't tell us. Okay.
Okay, so I actually made it as a book first, but then I couldn't save it as a book, so I made it a PowerPoint. So this is the story of how I learned how to plan. It seems simple enough, but actually there's like a lot more to it than you might think. So I'm Domain 1, Planning and Preparation. Central issue is designing instruction. So this is kind of the story of my experience through UTEP. There's a lot of thought that goes into planning, with pedagogy and content knowledge of your students. But the part I really struggled with was the organization part. So mostly organizing my time and my thinking, and finding a way that works for me to make sure I'm considering everything that I need to think about as a teacher on a daily basis. So before UTEP, I considered myself a pretty organized person. I loved rearranging my closets, literally on the weekends. That's what I do. Fitting as many things as I possibly can in the most efficient way possible in this tiniest amount of space. Thrilling. I love it. But organizing space and organizing my thoughts and my time, completely different things. So while I thought lesson planning would come naturally, it actually was more of a challenge than I originally anticipated. So my problem in practice, as I started tutoring, and definitely into my first placement where I had to plan every day, I started having a lot of questions about where to start and what do I do next, and okay, I've got this part down, now what do I work on after that? And so I kind of got paralyzed by all the possible things you could think about. But I narrowed it down to 3 big questions throughout my entire UTEP experience, which is first, what do I think about? Where do I start first? What is everything I need to consider? So what elements are most important? And finally, how can I organize my thinking process so that I'm making sure I think about these things every time I do a lesson plan, and not just 1 or 2 of them? a really long time until I absolutely could not put it off anymore, and then I was freaking out. So objectives, okay, this seems simple enough. You can hardly see the pictures, but there's a plate there. Objectives is on the plate. So one plate at a time. Objectives. Okay, what's the task? What's the goal? Okay, I can do this. Definitely when we started doing understanding by design last summer and throughout this whole year with unit planning, you kind of see where all your lessons fall into your unit plan. So you have this big goal and you narrow it down to little goals. And I'm like, okay, I can do this. I can write objectives. And I did. So keeping the goal in mind, backwards planning, all these things were like really inspiring. I felt really empowered. So I wrote objectives. I got pretty good at writing objectives, but that's pretty much all I did. I had objectives, I had my agenda, I had some time estimates, which were never accurate, and I was like, okay, I'm getting pretty good at this lesson planning thing, but really this was more like lesson mapping than lesson planning. So we're getting there, but it's just not quite. So this is one of my journal entries when I was starting to feel like really good about objectives. Like I'm seeing improvements, like I can see where I'm going, lesson planning. I don't freak out when I sit down now. I'm like, okay, I have a goal, I just have to figure out how to get there. So we're getting closer to our goal. So the next question is like, what elements are most important? So this is a concept map of everything I could think of that could fit on one page. It is definitely not everything, but you have to consider when you're lesson planning. So the question is, which ones are important? All of them? Duh. All those things that like seem really natural when the teacher gets up there, you actually plan for those, believe it or not. I thought, I'll get up there, I have my map, I know what I'm doing, I know what the activity is, I've got my materials, so like the rest comes with practice, right? No, you plan those things, for sure. So I can hardly see it, but these are some worksheets for like a lab I designed and a reading guide. We use reading guides a lot at Lynn Blue to help students do a lot of reading. And so we would try to make like concept maps, or like, this was like a chart that like organized information. Basically, I got really good at like making worksheets, and I'm like, okay, I know what the activity is, I designed a worksheet for it, I designed amazing questions. Everything I could possibly want to teach the students is on the page, so I won't forget to talk about it, right? Okay, we're getting closer. So we're thinking about a lot more things than we were thinking about before. So we have our objective and our agenda, but now we're starting to think about the learning task and the procedures involved. We're actually explaining the procedures and the expectations that go with them, what we want students to do. We actually think about when we're going to hand out materials instead of it just being chaos. Like, okay, so there's a lot of cool things that I'm getting a lot better at. And I even did a practice reach evaluation with our resident principal, and I was expecting to get unsatisfactory and everything because I was feeling terrible, but I actually got basic proficient, and I was feeling like a rock star. And then, post-observation with Jeanette. So you can barely see it, but I named foods with common questions that Jeanette would ask me, like, what is the purpose of the lesson? Like if Jeanette watching my class doesn't know and she is an educator, my students absolutely do not know why they're doing this. Why should they care? Where are your transitions? How can we save time during transitions? Because a lot of time gets wasted with kids moving around. So yeah, a lot of common questions that I had definitely heard from my CI before, so I wasn't surprised, but at the same time, like, I was feeling like a rock star like 1 page ago, like what happened? I had a lot of things to think about, especially because I think about all these things that Jeanette's asking me, but somehow they're not showing up in my plan. What's the problem? This is the problem. My organization. So, I had Post-its for everything. Like, what's the purpose? I had a Post-it for it. What are the kids supposed to do? I had a Post-it for it. And I had a clipboard that I would keep attendance on that had every Post-it I would need to know for that day. The problem is I had so many Post-its that, like, how can I keep track of all that? Like, I really never sat down and organized, like, a plan. I just had a Post-it for everything, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to Post-it for it, so I'll remember it. Like, we're golden, right? No. So, yeah. Every morning I woke up and my desk looked like this. It was awesome. So, the last question, how do I organize my thinking? How do I take all these Post-its and make an actual plan instead of just scattered pieces of thoughts that I never tied together?
So I met with Jeanette a lot. We talked about all the things I'm missing, my common blind spots, things that I've noticed I'm missing, but somehow I haven't figured out how to plan it. And some major areas of growth, some major goals, and I got really inspired. So I made a million templates. I made a daily lesson plan template, I made a weekly plan template, a homework calendar, a unit plan calendar. I made everything. I was really excited. And Jeanette, she saw me in the hallway and she goes, "Where did you come from? This is what we want. This is what we want to see." So I was really excited. So moving forward into next year, I have goals and I have some steps to actually achieve those goals. Not just thinking about it in the abstract anymore. I have like things I want to do and some questions that I want to think about moving forward. So goals, definitely have a plan to schedule. Give myself deadlines. I've discovered that although I'm terrible at making structure for myself, I'm getting better. I thrive with structure. So I'm going to give myself deadlines. I'm going to unit plan over the summer, spend Saturdays planning for the following week, so that way I'm not scrambling every day for my lesson plan on Post-its. It won't be on Post-its this time. And then use more pre-assessments to help track students' progress. And ask for help. If I had asked Jeanette for help way back in the beginning when I was freaking out about my lesson planning, we could have avoided a lot of this tragedy. But it's a happy ending because I have my templates and I'm feeling awesome and confident, celebrating. So moving forward, questions I'm thinking about is just how can I create a learning community where like every student feels safe and welcome? How can I plan to like make that happen? How can I encourage equity of voice so like not all the same students are talking all the time? And how can I foster like self-reflection in the classroom? So I'm really nervous, but a lot faster than originally anticipated. But I wanted to thank everyone in UTEP. It's been like a wonderful 2 years, especially for short meetings. Thank you all for coming. Thanks for being our awesome instructors. And I'm really looking forward to next year.
Hello everyone. My name is Natasha. I'm so excited that you all are here. I actually want to start with how I got to UTEP, how I got to UChicago. And after I graduated college, I was applying to graduate school. But in the meantime, I had to do something. I had to like pay rent. And so I joined AmeriCorps, I joined City Year. And they placed me in an algebra classroom at Chicago Vocational School at 87th and Jeffrey. And I was there for a year, and I was tutoring students. And I got to meet a lot of students. I was working with freshmen, and we got real close. We made some real relationships that really impacted who I am, how I understand the world, and I think that impact was also made on them in the space that we share in the classroom. This is one of my students, Lexi. Shout out to Lexi. She's a freshman in this picture, but she's going to be a senior in the fall. But it was such a powerful experience working with students like Lexi that I knew after that year I didn't want to leave. I wanted to stay in the classroom. And at the time, I could only think of one way of staying in the classroom, and that was being a teacher. And that's how I ended up at UTEP, at UChicago. But I didn't know that much about teaching when I first started UTEP. I never thought I'd be in education, but I did know one thing. I knew the type of teacher that I did not want to be. I know any Matilda fans, this is Miss Trunchbull, but so many of my experiences in high school, especially in math and science, the teacher owned that space. They were the sole source of content. They controlled the rules and the procedures. There was no place for me. I was passive. It was my job to kind of repeat the knowledge they spit out. It was my job to mindlessly obey their rules. It was a miserable experience. And I knew that I did not want to be that type of teacher. I knew I didn't want to have that type of classroom. And so I realized I wanted the opposite of that. I wanted my students to truly be at the center. I wanted it to be a space where they could see themselves, where they own content, where they own power. That really, really excited me. And that's kind of the mentality I came in with UTEP. But it wasn't until last summer actually, that I had the chance to work at the whole classroom level. Before that, I was only working in like one-on-one and small groups, and I had that down. I was like, okay, I can do this. But this was the first time during this camp last year that I got to begin working towards this vision that I just described to you. So before I say anything, I'm just gonna show it to you. Let me know your thoughts. Be nice. Okay, hope this works. Oh, real quick, let's shout out to Aisha and Miss Crockett. I was co-teaching with her. So that's me in the ponytail. I'm wearing a cream sweater. I don't know if you can tell, I'm actually talking. I'm moving my arms. Please raise your hand if you can hear me. Neither could my students. Oh, you can hear me?
Well, I can't understand the words, but I can hear it.
Okay, so you can hear me. Can you understand what I'm saying?
No.
Exactly. So this is the problem. I wanted to be a teacher, this amazing teacher that shared the space with the class of students, but I couldn't even communicate with them. They could not even hear me. And what I realized was I was so scared of being Miss Trunchbull, of being that dominating teacher, that I lost my presence in the classroom. And as Rita and Jeanette pointed out, I was so scared of being teacher-centered. I wanted my students to do everything that I basically did nothing. And that's not a really good idea, especially if I think teachers are important, they need to be doing something. And so I took their feedback, and I was like, I need to come up with a plan. I need to take action. And so I was like, if I'm being too soft, then I'll just be loud. And if I'm being passive, I'm gonna be assertive. This makes sense, right? Like that thought process, I'm not crazy, right? And so like, I'm coming off of classes unsure, I'm gonna be super, super confident. I'm gonna be like fabulous Miss Diva teacher. And I took this kind of action plan into my first year of teaching, as student teaching in the fall. Before I go further, do we think this worked? You said yes. This did not work, my results. Students were even louder. They were talking over me. Because they were talking, they couldn't hear the direction or the concept that I was explaining. So they got irritated, which led me to be irritated, and now everyone's irritated. And this is specifically during portions of class where I'm in the front like this. It wasn't so much a problem when I was working with students one-on-one, small group. I was good there. It was when I was here, when I was being the sing, that I was struggling. And so yeah, everyone's irritated. And it took Jeanette coming into the classroom for me to gain some perspective. You'll probably be like, I think Jeanette is like everything, and we all know her. But she made a really interesting observation. She told me, when you get louder, when you get in the assertive stance, that's when students disobey you more. That's when they get louder, that's when they talk over you. It's when you relax and you get into your casual tone that students start listening to you. So I was like, that's good, there's a little bit of good in there, but I was confused. When I was being passive, I had no presence. And when I started being assertive, I had no presence. And I couldn't figure out how to be in the middle. And it's really ironic too that I became like this because, I don't know if you remember, that's the teacher I didn't want to be. I didn't want to be that mean teacher, the assertive teacher, that dominating teacher who took up the entire classroom. And it really took my students to give me feedback that really helped me understand how to make teacher-centered instruction, when I'm in the front, how to make that more effective. And here is some feedback from my students. So you can take a chance and read that. You're so small, it's so hard to take you seriously. And basically they were telling me was that they knew when I was in the front and trying to be this dominating teacher that that wasn't me. And it was very hard for them to take them seriously. And I asked them, I'm like, how do you know that's not me? You don't know me like that. And they told me, no, Miss Singh, when you're with us one-on-one, when you're with us in small groups, you're not like that. It's only when you go up to the front that you become this crazy teacher. And we're not going to take that seriously because we know the real you. So it really took hearing it from them for me to put all this together. And so I knew from the summer I had to be loud. I know no one heard me. I think you were being nice in the back. No one heard me. So I had to be loud enough so students could hear me. And I had to be assertive, but not too assertive where I'm a trunchbull, mean, dominating teacher. But I also had to be myself. And that sounds really vague, but in the context of the classroom, that really meant leveraging the relationships I had with students. So when I went from being in small groups to the front, it was the same person. So this is what I was thinking, okay, this might work. This might work. This might give me effective teacher-centered instruction. So I'm gonna show you some video towards the end of my placement, my student teaching placement at Brooks. Warning, we are dissecting cats in the video. So if there's gonna be cats and they're like cut open. And the other thing I'll say to frame it is that I'm starting, the video starts with me one-on-one with the student, and then I move to the whole classroom. So during the video, see if you can find these three things or not. Hopefully I can click on it faster. That's me in the blue sweater. I'm rocking the high pony this day.
Okay. Something that I'm noticing is happening is that when you make your chest, cut ready, you're going too deep. Don't panic. Just make that side, the side that you're going to go to the ribs. Then your other side can be the superficial side of the chest. Okay? It happened with Kenya and Thompson and Mariah. You want an example of what going too deep looks like? Go to Kenya.
Close. I could have said that. So going back to this, could you guys hear me? Yes. Okay. And was I a mean dictator, Miss Trunchbull? Okay, good. And those of you that know me, did you see me being me? Like, could you see Natasha? Okay. So this is the end of my placement, and I found this started to really work with me. I'm not there yet. I still hate being in front of the classroom. I still like students to be at the center. But this is kind of a base of which I want to use to kind of get better and develop in this next year of teaching. And that's my presentation on how I learned to become more effective in teacher-centered instruction. But before I go, I do want to take the time to thank a lot of people. And I'm going to start with UTEP staff, secondary staff. Everyone's already spoken about how amazing you are. Rita and Tina, thank you so much for collecting feedback and always being ready to reflect. You've been so instrumental in my growth. Josh, thank you for having your ish together and like directing me to the right resources. Brian, I can't tell you how much care and love you're able to convey in the classroom. So thank you for making me feel like loved in the classroom space that I mentioned earlier. I never felt like that. Thank you so much. Doug, thank you for working relentlessly to make UTEP what it is. I'm so honored to be a part of this program. And Jeanette, you are my like teaching guru. I want to be like you one day. So thank you. Thank you to my UTEP staff, my cohort staff. Thank you to my classmates. I've grown so much from you. Special shout outs to Russell, Fabian, Aisha, and John. Thank you for always being ready to listen. Thank you for dealing with my personality. I think you all are going to be amazing teachers. And then a couple shout outs to my amazing friends. Mahi, you are like a brother to me. And your support in who I am and what I do has meant everything. My dear friend Erin, you've been my girl. You are my girl. We're so far apart, but our friendship hasn't changed. She flew in from New York to surprise me today, so thank you. With my mom and dad, Mama, Papa, I know, he's waving. I know that I drive you crazy and you don't understand like my decisions, but regardless, you've supported me and you've guided me, you've loved me every single day. I don't deserve it, but know that I live for you both and I live to make you proud. And lastly, my sister, my other half, I feel like today you're graduating with me. You've been with me every step. Honestly, she could fill out my calf for me. She knows everything about everything that I come home to. Thank you for being fabulous. Thank you for being there for me. Thank you for being strong. Thank you for pushing me. I'm so lucky to have a sister like you in my life. So that's it. The end. Thank you guys so much.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm Angelo. Today I'm going to be talking about planning for effective instruction. And for those of you who know me, it might seem a little weird that I'm focusing on planning because you know I love to plan. I've planned every minute of my life since I can remember. Just an excerpt. This is my schedule from when I was in college. I know some of you accidentally saw it one time and now it's become kind of a famous joke thing. So I love to plan things out. But I still struggle with it in the context of teaching. So today I want to really focus on where I started and where I've started to make growth in planning for effective instruction. So in the CAF, that's domain 1, selecting instructional goals and designing coherent curriculum, coherent instruction. Sort of some of the problems I ran into right away with this were, at first, there's so little time in teaching. I just took the schedule at the school I'll be working at and did a little bit of math, and it comes out to be just like 2 working weeks of contact with my students over the entire year. So how do I effectively plan to squeeze everything into a tiny amount of time? And that's been such a struggle with me. If you have infinite time, you can do a lot of things, but when you don't have infinite time, you have to really prioritize and make really intentional decisions ahead of time. So that was a real struggle for me when I realized just how limited the time I have is to make that difference. And the second problem, of course, is that there's too much to teach. This is a small excerpt of my notes of things that I should teach in my biology curriculum. And you don't have to read it, but the point is there's too much to teach and too little time. So planning is really important, and I really struggle with it a lot of the time to make those effective decisions. So the real problem I'm trying to focus on is how do I focus my curriculum? It's impossible to talk about everything as much as I would love to. So I need to focus it. So throughout the presentation, I want to just touch on some of the ways I've decided to focus my curriculum and my thought process about that and how that's changed over time. The first part of this is recognizing that my students they make intelligent decisions about what they want to learn, and they know what they want to learn, and that comes from their background and their personalities and all of their lived experiences. So I need to recognize that. This is just one example of an objective from a tutoring lesson I made early on. It's not really important that you read it, but you'll see in a minute that's probably not a good objective, first of all. But second of all, I wanted to teach evolution. I wanted to help my students understand this really abstract and complex process. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll talk about something a little bit more simple, dog breeding. Who doesn't love animals, right? I talk about it with my first tutoring partner. It goes really well. He gets really excited. Then I talk about it with my second tutoring partner, and I open with, so do you like dogs? And she says, no, I hate dogs. So I say, oh, well, that's interesting. Well, we're going to talk about dogs today. And it was a train wreck, as you can imagine. So talking about how dogs have evolved might be interesting to me and to some people, but not to everyone. And I need to really keep in mind that my students have a voice and they have decisions that they need to make, and I should respect that and bring that in and use that as an advantage, as a strength for my planning. So that's one way I can focus my curriculum. Another sort of logical step you can make is that, well, in my class, I should prepare my kids for the next class, right? So I should always prepare my students for what comes up next. So in 9th grade, they should prepare for 10th grade, in 10th grade for 11th, and so on until they get to life. That's all well and good, but the problem is that we don't really know what they need to know in the next class, right? All of the teachers in this country pretty much do something different. They make their own curriculum, they do their own thing, and it's great to have that flexibility and to incorporate your students' voice, but it makes it really difficult to plan for the future and to maximize that short amount of time with the most amount of instruction and learning and skills that will be beneficial to your students. So, of course, in our classes, we talked about standards. Lots of smart people have gotten together and tried to make standard curriculum across the country, right? And so I thought, well, sure, I'll just take this. We learned how to do it in our classes. I had an awesome instructor, Jeanette, who really walked us through these standards. And I thought, great, problem solved. I'll do what's in the standards. Well, then you start looking at the standards. And there are some great ones, and there are some not so great ones. This is one standard out of maybe 20 in the next generation science standards. Construct an explanation based on evidence for how the structure of DNA determines the structure of proteins which carry out the essential functions of life through systems of specialized cells. It's insane, right? You can't honestly expect to be able to teach this and all the other 20 standards in 2 working weeks, right? So that's still not enough. I still haven't been able to find out how to focus, at this point, my curriculum. So sort of the epiphany that happened midway through my career at UTEP was that, don't bother. Why am I focusing on, don't bother teaching. Don't bother trying to pick out arbitrary pieces of knowledge that they need to know, because it is arbitrary, right? You can have someone memorize a piece of information and they'll forget it later if it's not directly relevant to their lives. It's human nature and there's nothing wrong with that, right? If I took a quick poll and asked how many people know what a mitochondria does, I don't know what the results would be, right? And that's okay, right? You don't need to know that for your everyday life. You don't need to know that to be successful for whatever it means to be successful for you. And if it is important, you'll know it and you'll learn it. So I started to shift my focus away from content and away from trying to cram as much into a year as possible and focusing more on skills. So the first quote up there is an excerpt from a reading on the nature of science. And my goal as a science teacher now isn't for students to memorize a list of facts or to know, equations or definitions or things like that. I want them to appreciate the scientific process and to appreciate that knowledge is tentative and that you need to ask questions, you need to do investigations, you need to critically evaluate things. And that should be the focus of my class. And so moving forward, I sort of had this revelation midway through my UTEP career that I shouldn't focus on the content. I should focus on the skills, and then bring in whatever content is interesting and the small amounts of content that are relevant to everyone's lives. And part of the way that we go about this in teaching is to write objectives, to begin with the end in mind. So I think, where do I want my students to end up at the end of this class? What do I want them to be able to do? What do I want them to know? And just like a quick overview of what objectives should be like, They should be made first, they should guide your instructions. They should be the most important thing you're talking about. You need to focus on what you want them to do and what you want them to know. They should also be manageable. That first objective I showed you before about dogs and evolution, and it encompassed everything. Not manageable, not possible to do. And they need to be measurable. You need to know if you meet your goal. And if you're not meeting your goal, you need to be able to collect data so that you can make decisions to improve on meeting those goals. So I just picked out 2 different objectives from before and after my UTEP career to hopefully show a little bit of growth. The first thing you notice is that it's shorter, which probably means it's a little bit more manageable. So I tried to incorporate a lot of what I learned into writing better instructions, objectives to guide and focus my instruction at UTEP, or in teaching. And then the next sort of step, the next sort of realization we had at UTEP was unit planning. And that completely changed the way I thought about teaching. It's one thing to say, I'm going to start with the end in mind for this one lesson, but it's a very different thing to say, what do I want them to know? What giant understandings do I want them to construct by the end of my time with them, by the end of 6 weeks, by the end of 10 weeks? And we used a text for this, which is Understanding by Design, which really goes about explaining how to unit plan, and I learned so much from it. And one of the things that stuck with me most was a story right at the beginning that I'll just try to summarize for you, and some of my cohort mates might remember this, but they describe a teacher who, in elementary school, who wanted to teach lessons about apples. It was the fall, it was harvest season, so the whole school got together and they planned an entire unit around apple picking. The art class drew apple leaves, the science class analyzed different types of apple trees, they went and took a field trip and they bought for apples and they did all these things. The kids had a blast, right? And when I was reading this, I'm sort of like, yeah, that makes sense. This is what teaching should be like. And then I got to the end and said, this is a bad example of teaching. And it was sort of blew my mind because that's exactly what I meant. Oh, it'll be engaging, it'll be fun, it's interdisciplinary, right? And it was a really big revelation to me that effective instruction means not only planning, means not only engaging students, but it means being really purposeful about those objectives and about what instruction you're going to give. Because at the end of the day, who cares about apples? The same way, who cares about mitochondria, right? You need to pick the skills that will help students the most in the long run. So with that in mind, and with lots of feedback from my instructors, I think I finally started to make a little bit of progress. And unit planning is a really complex task, and I failed at it many, many times, as Jeanette can attest to. But I think by the end, I started to sort of get it down after 6, 7 tries. And you might not be able to read it, but in the corner there is a positive comment from Jeanette saying, hey, I think you got it. And Jeanette is very encouraging, right? She's always positive, she's always encouraging, but she's also critical, which I learned really, really well from. She would say, you did this well, but this is not intentional. How is this helping your students get to the next level? And to see this at my last unit plan was just, it made me so happy to say yes, you finally got it. And I know I have a long way to go, but this is just, I just wanted to sort of highlight one area in which I think I have grown over UTEP, one specific area, and how I'm going to better serve my students at the end of this. So with that, I'm just going to wrap up. Obviously, you've heard the thank yous before, but I just want to thank all of our secondary instructors, Brian, Josh, Tina, Doug, and obviously Jeanette. I've learned so much from you, and I appreciate so much how all of you have worked so hard day and night and sacrificed so much for us, and I don't know how I could ever repay you. And then obviously my cohort mates, I've learned so much from all of you. Thank you so much for welcoming me into this community. I was really, really nervous at the beginning of UTEP, and I guess I'm going out nervous too, but I really appreciate how much you've really welcomed me into the community. So thank you.
Bio person, and these are my struggles with planning and assessment. So a little bit about me and planning. Essentially, before UTEP, I thought that teachers were given a nice handy-dandy handbook and it told them everything they needed to do, and it was cut and dry and simple, and that teaching had absolutely nothing to do with planning. That you walked into the room and the magic happened, and children did well, and if you gave them assessments, it was to sabotage their confidence because it's just what tests were about. And then when you did give assessments, they were only standardized, so every 3 to 6 years at ISAT, that ACT, things like that. So that was fine and dandy. And then I got to UTEP, and I had that wonderful foundations year where I had 2 tutoring partners, and these kids I worked with one-on-one for the entire year. And so in planning lessons for my one-on-one tutoring, I learned that everything does as a result of planning. I also learned that planning is hard and tedious, and I would spend hours and hours on like one section, but I've grown, so that's nice. I also learned that planning does not apply only to the content, and that good planning does not always lead to good instruction. So with that portion, I'm actually going to switch out. Oh, that kind of worked. Alright, so this is a plan that I made with one of my tutoring partners, and as you see, I had this nice little script of things that I would do with my tutoring partner. And so in the first 5 minutes, I'd ask him about his day, how things went, and then I'd let him finish a snack, and then we'd talk about some animal populations, and everything would go fine and dandy. So that first 5-minute period turned into this. He's asking for a pencil from a teacher off screen. And I'm going to get him a pencil. And then he realizes he's on camera. There's a pencil. And he's still on camera. And I'm telling him to stop. And we're starting to talk a little bit about animal populations. And he's playing with the pencil. And that's what I planned for. So, as you can see, went from nice, intricate planning and didn't work out, so kind of scratched that method of planning. So then we have during my residency year. So now I am student teaching. I'm at Ace Tech with Aisha. We're both learning with Ryan Palmer. And I have an honors biology class. And so, no, I have the regular biology class. So I realized that planning is even more arduous and discouraging when you do it alone. I also realized that planning is foolish without advice, so cue Jeanette. I also realized that planning is about getting students to an understanding and not just through a test. That assessments are a good tool for guiding planning, even if it's not the means to an end. And that everything we plan is not necessarily a success or necessary. So, hopefully this works. It does. So this is my next plan. So I actually am starting to look at how I will assess my students. So I have one of those handy dandy standards that Angela introduced us to earlier. And I wanted my students to compare diffusion and osmosis by dramatizing it. So essentially they would be acting out the movement of molecules. And so I thought that this would be a really good activity for students to do, actually get into it, hands-on. Let's see how that worked out. So at this point, I'm kind of pulling teeth, getting all of them to come up and participate. I have a few water molecules, a few sugar molecules, and a few salt molecules. They kind of should have a piece of paper in their hands. So this is all in real time that they're moving to the front of the room that slowly. No time lapse here. All that enthusiasm just bottled into all their little happy learning minds. And so now that I've gotten enough of them up there, I'm thinking that, hey, from here they should, go along with it. I have a nice little tape border on the floor to mimic a membrane, and, I tell them, hey, now you should be moving. Needless to say, we did that for about 5 minutes, and it was planned to go for 30, and it did not work out at all. So, once again, planning, not always as you think it will go. So now that I've had all these ups and downs in planning, I've realized that now I need to start focusing on the full scale plan. What do I need to do as far as the curriculum? So I started designing assessments that will prepare my students for life-changing exams. Not only do I want my assessments to model what my students will be demonstrating for me, what they know, but also exams that prepare them for things like the ACT or the different assessments that they have throughout their school years. I also wanted to plan for behavior as well as content, because even if I was planning to get this done and that done, if their behavior wasn't there, then it kind of threw everything else off. And I also wanted to plan for the best, but still prepare for the worst. And incidentally enough, once again, I got a more sophisticated planning tool. And so here I started planning for warm-ups that my students would do. I even had like time intervals for which they would do those things. I planned for transitions, and I also had what activities they would be doing. But incidentally enough, in this next video, shout out to Post-its. I happen to use one.
I go around eating more and get the makeup. So back to you. While you're doing your homework, what you're going to do is on the board there's a small prompt. Okay? It says on your sheet of paper, I'm just happy the whole sheet, you can back and I don't know. Just make sure that you write down a question that you still have. A, what did I tell you to say? Like, you're the only person who actually has these words. I can put you in the top.
Correction for behavior just happened right there.
So, happy paper, hold paper, I don't care. Write down questions you still have on your introduction. Do not put your name on the paper. These are not any questions that we're going to address later on in class. So, if you do not have a question, write down I do not have a question. We want to give the illusion that everyone can ask a question so that
no one person will feel ostracized, and that was the rest of that speech. So at this point, my planning has kind of evolved, and that has translated into how smoothly my classes have started to run. Kids are actually starting to be engaged in things, and they're actually starting to respond to me when I say, hey, your table needs to be quiet. And this is actually my last placement at Lynn Bloom, and I had middle school. And Jeanette can attest to how hard I fought against being with middle schoolers. But I think she did it on purpose, because being with middle schoolers has actually pushed me to do a lot more thorough planning, and has actually pushed me to be a better planner. I actually script, and that little speech I gave was actually in some detail on another Post-it for that day. And it just makes me a more well-rounded person, and I'm a lot more confident in my teaching. So now, moving on, I am the freshman biology instructor at DRW Charter High School in the North Lawndale area. And with this new opportunity, I know that I have a lot more room to grow in my planning, both from the day-to-day level to an entire curriculum, because with DRW I have that freedom. And that's it. Now I just want to say thank yous to my wonderful family. They all kind of banded together to make sure that I could be successful in school and pursue this career that I really love. Shout out to my best friends, my fellow graduate Jessica, wait a minute, I guess like she just don't care, and my bride-to-be, not to me, my best friend Danielle. She's made me a maid of honor this year, so I'm really happy. But they've been like two really great listeners and confidants, and I really appreciate them. To UTEP, both staff and my classmates, who have been a great collection of minds, personalities, and philosophies, and you have pushed and pulled me a lot these past 2 years. And of course, to my CIs, Ryan Palmer at ACE and Ms. Copper at Lynn Bloom, definitely taught me really great skills as far as finding resources for underserviced schools and dealing with middle schoolers. And of course, DRW for giving me an opportunity. I'm actually off of work today because they actually have me as a summer school science teacher. So I'm right into the thick of things, and I think that's also really helping me as far as like collaboratively planning and pulling all that together. And of course, just giving thanks to God and just how He's empowered me and gotten me through this experience, especially when things got a little hard. So thank you all, and that's it.
Hello everyone, I'm Russell Masiag. I'm in the mathematics part of the program, and I want you to look at this picture and just enjoy for a second about how everybody is happy, smiling, even the people in the dirty wheelbarrow. So, what's great today, I get to talk about all the things I've improved on. So I'm going to introduce the domain and indicators that I'll be talking about, talk about my problem practice, and then talk about my growth and what I want to do next. So shout out to John, who actually picked what he thought I was best at as something to shout out to me, but it's something that I felt like I improved on the most during this time. So the domain in general is classroom environment, but then it's broken down into 4 components that Aisha kind of described in the framework. And the 2 I want to focus on today are creating that environment of respect and rapport, and also establishing a culture of learning. So just to kind of give you the details, again, seeing the complexity of this framework, that's everything that goes into just creating an environment of respect and rapport. And to me, what was most important was that students and teachers need to feel respected and need to be respectful. And also, everybody needs to be focused on growth. Additionally, in this other component, the focus of the classroom really needs to be on learning and all the structure that's necessary. And if that's the domain, over the past 2 years, I've always asked myself, which is maybe why John thought I was so good at it, but I always kept asking myself, how can I actually build a respectful environment where we would actually want to share our strengths and struggles? So I wanted to take a second and kind of have everybody in the room kind of ground themselves in something that was a struggle for you back in high school. So this could be academic, this could be social, this could be personal, it could be religious. So take a second to think about this, and at the end I'm going to call on somebody to share that very personal thing. You already found one. You can think of your deepest one, the scariest one. Think of that just for a second. All right, so now raise your hand if you would actually be willing to share this secret or struggle you've been facing. Very few people, right? I don't know if you would actually share it if I called on you, or if it would be that deepest one. So people really aren't willing to share these struggles, especially with an entire group, and especially this group where we're all basically strangers. Additionally, as a teenager, you're still trying to find your identity, you're trying to figure out who you are, and you don't want to share these questions you have about yourself. But one question that you might be asking is, why should the teacher care? This isn't really a part of the Common Core, it's not really a part of any of our objectives. Why should the teacher care what these struggles and strengths of students are? My entire presentation is focused on why we do actually need to care. And I just wanted to give an example of an environment where I was from back before I started UTEP that really had a community that was very respectful and focused on students' growth. So on the left-hand side of this slide is a picture of me and my students working at a Habitat for Humanity house and trying to get together a yard that's been overrun with weeds. And then on the right is a picture of me and my students doing a team building exercise where you pull on one string, and on the other end, a person goes flying into the ceiling of a gymnasium. That took a whole lot of trust to get tied up to a string that everybody's holding on you, and if you fall, you hit the hard ground. It's really built a strong community between people. And at the end of it, I came into UTEP from this community that was very close-knit, and there was a lot of genuine and helpfulness between students and between the teacher and students, where we could talk about academics, volunteering, and all this other stuff, especially vulnerability. And this was with students that were really different. They came from different parts of the city, they came from very different schools, and even different personal situations. So there's a lot of reasons why students wouldn't really be able to form this close-knit community. So coming into UTEP, I encountered this. So I had a tutoring student, I really didn't bond with her well. This is from a video. The overall sense that I always had with her was that she was kind of really just bored while I was there. And I would kind of like a burden that she worked with after school to get extra credit, and there was just extra stuff that really wasn't necessary. And even I faced more difficulty with my other student, where I felt my relationship was even more fragile, and I had even more difficulty just getting him to come to tutoring sessions. So here's the attendance, which isn't really easy to see. On the left is starting our academic year, and on the right is where we ended. By the end of the year, he was only showing up for less than half of our scheduled meetings. So this really stresses the importance of a respectful relationship, and at that point, I clearly didn't have one with this student. Tons of authors we read in school and in classes really focus on you need to have strong relationships to get students interested in yourself and engaged in class. So walking into my next, before we left tutoring, we had one last event that really brought these relationships out, and after we had this pizza party with board games, we had fun. You can see that one student who seemed really bored actually kind of having a little bit of fun. The sessions after that were really fun. We talked, we actually shared a little bit about ourselves, and we were able to connect and work with each other. So after tutoring, my goal became to form these relationships and have fun as early as possible once I met students. So that started our summer camp experience, which I called here the in-between experience. So I wasn't yet the teacher. I was working with John and a CI in the classroom. I was still kind of a tutor, but not yet a teacher. But I really tried to work hard on building these relationships. So some of the structure we had for that was actually community time where we did critical thinking activities. The teacher wasn't really teaching math or science, they were teaching something else. So there's a little bit more access there. There were activities where we did group dynamic and individual relationships. We did scavenger hunts outside where the teacher was kind of just another part of the team. And there's a lot of fun activities that we did, and especially for me, what I needed was a network of support. So I had, like I said earlier, I had a CI, John was in the room with me, and I had all the great staff from UTEP who was always in the room giving me advice and giving me things to work on. So by the end, I felt really confident. I felt like I formed great relationships. I felt like my students were actually enjoying the time I spent with them. But by the end of our summer camp, on one of the components that I said I was interested in, I got a whopping 0.5. That's literally the worst score you can get. It's out of 4, you wouldn't think it's that big of a deal. I actually felt really strong about it. My comment was at the bottom, I think I'm doing well. Clearly, no. And I was really interested in figuring out what was going on. And I think for me, this isn't evidence that I wasn't trying, it's just evidence that I'm not ready to be a teacher yet. So walking into our first student teaching experience, I was at Fanger down the south side. I was ready to become that teacher, to make sure that I was actually doing the things I was trying and I was getting success at that. And I'm really thankful that I was at Fanger because they had a great community there between teachers and students. So I got to be a part of that community. I also got to work with students one-on-one for 10 whole weeks. So there's a lot of time to build those relationships, a lot of time to do tutoring. And during the last part, I tried to run class with as many group activities as I could. So again, at the end, I felt confident, I felt good about my relationships, and if pictures are enough evidence, I did form relationships. I had students who wanted to take this photo with me. I didn't force it on them. I felt good. And I hope this was good enough. But relationships aren't enough. I have to return back to my problem of practice. Was there an actual environment there where students felt able to share their strengths and struggles? And looking back at it, I did build these relationships. Great. And I wasn't present in the school. I was in the cafeteria a lot. I was walking the hallways during passing time. I was even in the library, just saying hi to students and popping in. But then some of the hiccups that I experienced, I was only forming relationships with the female students. I was still not accessing all my students, not being that person for all my students. Additionally, I noticed that when students were interacting with me in class, they were seeking out that tutoring experience. And I was still acting kind of like a tutor even though my role was a teacher. And lastly, I wasn't sharing myself during whole class discussions. I was self-deprecating, I put myself in front of the bus a lot, but I never shared myself in front of my students. So by the end of it, I said I felt like this duality between a tutor and lecturer, but I really didn't feel like a teacher. I felt like the boring person who got up front, lectured for a little bit, and then I was that tutor who walked around, worked with students one-on-one. So by the end of it, I was asking myself, what would I look like as a teacher, and who am I, and what should I actually share with my students during class time? So these were the questions that I walked into my last student teaching placement with, and I felt like I was actually becoming a teacher. So this was at Jones College Prep. It should be right underneath the picture, but it's white, so you can't really see it. But looking back at it, I made huge efforts actually joining the community that was there. We came in halfway during the school year. I talked to students, I talked to parents, I made gingerbread drawings. Shout out to Jeanette for modeling this for us. I'll get into it in a little bit. Then I also did a lot of tutoring. That's something that I'm happy with, it's something that I do enjoy doing, but I know I need to push myself further. So here's a picture of the gingerbread drawings. So I asked students to describe themselves and actually draw examples down on the picture. And I used this throughout my 15 weeks at Jones, and at the end, I asked them to incorporate this back into some feedback for me. So looking back over the entire year, I noticed that I was forming these strong relationships. Relationships wasn't the issue for me. And I started to share myself a lot, especially in closer knit communities, like either groups that hung out before school or after school, but I was still leaving myself a lot out of the bigger discussions in class. And even further, some hiccups that I've dealt with over the year, I really didn't have that strong teacher voice that Aisha developed. I didn't have that presence to ensure that students were respected, and I definitely didn't have that teacher voice to ensure that I was respected as the teacher. So I did speak up when students were disrespecting each other, but then when it came to me, if students were talking during my time or were disrespectful to me, I let it slide for some of the same reasons Aisha got into. I wanted to be that cool teacher, I wanted to be that hipster who just let things go. And lastly, I wasn't giving up a lot of the power so that students could have that responsibility to monitor their own behavior and motivate themselves. But at the end of it, I was happy that some things didn't change. So going back to my experience before UTEP, I was working with students who felt very comfortable to mock me. So I don't know people who know me, if that's a face I make a lot, but I guess back then it was. And all of them know that a lot of the jokes around our classes are focused on making fun of me. And my students felt the same. So all the quotes that are popping up is that from feedback I got from students. And I guess I don't know if I was good enough during my lecture today. But they really made fun of me for my pronunciation and for my spelling. Especially when I said variable, which I guess isn't the right way to say it. But with all this learning, all this reflection I did, I'm walking into my next year with some great ideas of what to do. So for out-of-class experiences, which you'll really want to focus on, is that tutoring that I am comfortable doing and that I love doing, but also focusing on some fun activities that don't require academic thought. So just fun activities outside the classroom, whether that's stuff that's already there for the school if I put on my own, but also volunteering, because that is a goal that you establish and then you work towards, but it doesn't have that academic component that some students get fearful of. And lastly, in my class, I really want to make sure that discussions are centered on our own experiences, whether it's the student or the teacher, but also that there's opportunities for groups and students to learn how to advocate for each other and push on each other. So lastly, I just wanted to thank all of you for listening to me. I felt really fun at UTEP. I felt like I was growing a lot. Sometimes I pushed a lot on my my teachers, there you go. And I'm really thankful that my teachers all responded to that very well. They didn't kick me out of the program. And they took all of my feedback in great stride, and I really want to make sure that I'm the teacher who encourages that behavior in my students, and I'm the teacher who can take all that feedback as well. Also wanted to give a special shout out to one of my math teachers who really helped me get in that math mind that Mike was talking about, get more excited about math during a time where I was kind of feeling a funk and I didn't feel that great in math. So thank you, Sarah, for making me more excited about math. All right, thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Lindsay Swess, and I've been part of the biology track with UTEP. I'm really nervous to be up here. That's something I practiced actually saying with my students from time to time. If I was having a really rough day, I developed enough of a relationship with them that I would tell them, maybe not that I was nervous, because after all, I don't know. So anyway, I want to say that because to me, the biggest part of teaching is developing a relationship with your students. And subsequently, that's like where I naturally gravitate towards and everything. And so I'm actually going to talk to you not about building relationships with my students, but about planning. I'm a type of person you can see, it's a little hard to see up here, but I'm giving a Prezi presentation, and there's a little person right here who's right off screen. But I'm going on my adventure through UTEP, all right? I like to kind of be on my feet, talking, moving people, being outside. Sitting down and planning is very hard for me. But over the course of my 2 years, I realized that that's actually a way that I can develop better relationships with my students to meet their learning needs and challenge and help them to learn better. All right. So anyway, starting out, my very first year of UTEP, we tutored, and this is how I envision teaching, right? I found somebody with a chicken and I brought it in, and the kids were learning about evolution and looking at comparing, contrasting dinosaur bone structure with chicken bone structure, right? To me, this is teaching, like this is what it's all about. There was some planning involved in this activity, but not as much as there potentially could have been. I'm not sure how much the student remembers from this experience besides, yeah, I got a hold of chicken today, it was so great. Okay. So a little later on, I'm going to show you just an example of my very early on lesson planning. I'm also very tactile, so I have a hard time with typing up lesson plans. It hurts my brain. So this early on my lesson plans, I just like handwrite things out. Like, here's what we're going to do. Early on, I was starting to get this idea, it's good to have an objective for your lesson. So this is again in the evolution unit. I was like, oh, I have a bunch of seashells at my house. I grew up in Rhode Island, and I had some from Lake Michigan. So I brought in all those and had the students compare and contrast them. I started touching on what the second highlighted box says, like what are some like student misconceptions. I thought about a few, but did I write them down and really put that deep thought into it? No. Okay. That would have been helpful because this lesson was a little confusing and it had to do a lot of that teasing out, which works one-on-one tutoring students. But when you have a whole classroom of students, it doesn't work. Anyway, so this is me at the beginning. I'd also make up these little agendas for my students. This helped me plan. It also helped me communicate with the students. I'd write little notes afterwards just to figure out which students things worked well with. By the end of my first year, I felt pretty good. Like, okay, I know these, I loved my 2 students, felt really good about my ability to plan for them. They have different learning needs, all that. All right, enter this is the summer, so enter SAMC. This is our science and math camp. Really quickly, this is some of my awesome team I learned, and one of our students. So we were working with, I think it was incoming 9th and 10th graders, which I had been working with 7th graders, so I was kind of nervous about the high schoolers. I still am, I'm not gonna lie. So new challenges here. 1, I'm planning with other people. 2, I'm planning for 20-ish students instead of just for 2. 3, I'm planning for a chunk of about 4 weeks instead of kind of a couple times a week just meeting individual student needs. And there are more challenges, I'll leave it at that. So what we did as a group planning together, I just want to show you some of the tools and things I've picked up on. We use Google Docs a lot. So at the very beginning of SAMC, I overcame my aversion to planning using technology and dove into using Google Docs or Google Drive. And this is just our folders. So SAMC, our topic was immunology. And then we created folders for each week, and then also down here at the bottom had kind of a master plan. All right, and then here you can see, this is just part of our overall master plan, but this is planning out each day of the camp. And these plans became more robust the day of, but this type of long-term planning in terms of teaching, this was something new to me. And it was something I struggled with, even, especially during SAMC. I just felt like my head was kind of swimming. I'm getting a little bit better at it now. Still a long way to go. All right, so after SAMC came my first placement, and I was very thankful. I was in a 7th grade classroom just about a mile away at Murray Language Academy. I made sure to integrate some hands-on outside experiences. This is some students, they were taking outdoor observations. They're looking at a wasp's nest up there. This was in a little unit on biodiversity, so just looking at what the biodiversity around the school is. It's my favorite part of teaching, right? Okay, but I realized that, again, there's this need for structure both for myself and for the students. That's where they're gonna flourish the best. So it's interesting, several people have talked about planning already. Kara, she mentioned coming up with a plan to plan for herself. So this was my plan to plan. And as you can see, my first placement, I had a good amount of time to plan. When these boxes aren't filled in, I had class and homework for UTEP. So I had a good amount of time to plan. I had a lot of support from Jeanette, and I only had one class of about 27 7th graders in a life science class I was planning for. So by the end of this placement, I was feeling pretty good. The school also provided me with a template for weekly lesson plans, and they actually required teachers to submit them on Sunday night for the following week. And I realized in retrospect, that was so good for me because it forced me just to sit down and plan everything out. This is just a small snapshot of 1 week's worth of those lesson plans. So leaving Murray, initially I was shaky, but by the end, feeling pretty good about planning. All right, the danger thin ice is up there on purpose. So my last student teaching placement was also at Jones College Prep with Russell, which is my lifeline there, I have no idea. And I really struggled with planning. And I think it was in large part because instead of just teaching 27 students, all of a sudden I was teaching 130 students in 3 anatomy classes and 2 biology classes, and my anatomy and physiology was a little rusty. So I was reteaching myself everything before I could even plan. And I also didn't have those clear structures that I had when I was at Murray. And what I took away from this experience was that I need structure. And so in addition to, I was required to come up with a whole unit plan. People have talked about understanding by design. I did all that. I walked through all those steps. But I still need this simplified structure. So my CI, or my lead teacher at Jones, she helped me come up with this just really basic kind of weekly schedule plan. Another tool that I kind of picked up, and I'll tweak all of these tools over and over again in the upcoming years. So despite all these planning struggles and everything, I do want to highlight, I had some really awesome moments. One of the things that I did with my students was they dissected fetal pigs, and I think that my strongest planning came in around these hands-on experiences. Here, I was very impressed. This is actually some of my students' work. I just wanted to put that up there to show you. I'm sorry, I didn't give you a trigger warning. This is a lamb heart. So actually, I got to go to a local slaughterhouse and pick up lamb hearts and bring them in for my students on the unit in the cardiovascular system. And this particular lab required a lot of planning, and I probably put the most planning into it, and in retrospect, it's the lab that went the most well in terms of overall student engagement. And from their lab reports, like depth of understanding the intricacies of the organ and the system overall. All right, so it's on thin ice. Looking back, I realized I need the structure. So in this in-between time, now that I'm done with student teaching, I took a couple of classes. One's called Transition to Teaching, and the other one is Science, Math, and Social Justice. And in both of those courses, I was just so thankful for the opportunity to zoom out and to step back. And we did one final huge unit plan relating a science topic to a social justice topic. And I won't go into too much detail there, but it forced me to, again, zoom out. And I actually pulled out, this is some notes. I'm hoping you can kind of see it. It's a little washed out. But this is kind of a mind map of what it takes to plan thoroughly and holistically as a teacher. And this is a document that one of our classes came up with this past year with Jeanette. I think we all worked on this together. And so during this transition time, I've just really been thinking about this whole big process, and I was able to exercise this by coming up with this final unit plan. So anyway, sorry you can't read it, but it's very intricate, but it's ultimately very empowering for me personally as a person who needs structure to see this whole process. All right, so looking ahead, I think the main things that I've learned about for myself when planning are that I really thrive having some structure and clear expectations, and I also want to kind of keep that sense of joy about learning alive. So I'll be teaching at Rachel Carson Elementary this upcoming year as their 7th grade science teacher, which if you know who Rachel Carson is, she's like naturalist lady. Anyway, it's kind of appropriate. Okay. And so in their curriculum, they use CPUP, which some of you might be familiar with, which is very structured. I'm familiar with it and very, very thankful that that structure will be in place. As well as CHAMPS, which is a classroom management structure. It's used school-wide, and I had exposure to that at Murray. And so I guess I'm thankful for those structures, and I'm also reflecting on the other structures that I've been exposed to over the course of my UTEP experience, and just figuring out how I'm going to tweak those and use those to help my planning going forward. All right, and so finally, just a thanks. I'm not going to go through all these. We're getting to the end of the day, but I forgot to put Sammy up there, who's my husband, and he's. I forewarned him that I forgot. So anyway, he's really been my rock these past 2 years, as well as everyone in the UTEP program. But just want to say thank you very, very much, and all the best to everyone.
Okay, so while Doug pulls this up, my name is Faven. For those of you keeping track, I am the last one, so we're almost there. I'm going to try to keep it a little short, so partially because I'm nervous, but mostly for your sake. So. Okay, so they went through all the structure in the Danielson, which I was banking on, so thanks, guys. So what I'm going to talk about is a particular problem of practice, which is questioning. If you know me at all, this is really ironic because I ask 1,000 questions. So when Jeanette was talking earlier about all the questions we've asked, I am 100% sure there was a picture of me in her mind. So I'm going to talk about questioning, and so kind of what framed this whole thing for me was thinking about like, what does it mean to be a good question? It's kind of where you gotta start if you want to ask a good question. So I came up with 3 categories. Don't judge me if these are not the ones that you would want a UTEP student to come out with, but these were the ones that came out for me. So the first thing is they're high quality. So they're not yes or no questions. They're really clear. They're really specific. You know what you want the answer to be in an ideal world. You know what the answer might be in a not so ideal world. And above all, they make them think. So it should be kind of difficult to answer. Okay? Also, variety. So the question should be different. They should provide students different points of access. So if question A doesn't get you, hopefully question B will get you to think. And then they keep it interesting, right? Nobody wants to be asked a really boring question over and over again. And then lastly, they involve many students. So you have a group of 30 people in front of you. I shouldn't just be asking John every question. I have done that before, but you don't want to do that, okay? So those are the three things: high quality, variety, involve many students. I already forgot it. So simple enough, right? So you're gonna see a video. I am not gonna preface this. If you're in UTEP, you've seen this student 1,000 times. So. Okay. So, that's the material So, where does that kind of material come from? Their alleles. Their alleles, which are where? In their bodies. But where? All over. But where? All over their body. I'm going to ask the same question. And I'm going to write it down. So, clearly my best friend. Okay, so this is one of my tutoring students from our very first summer. He's incredibly entertaining, as you can tell. So this is kind of where I started. So let's think about the things that we've learned. Okay, you've probably learned a lot about me in that 30 seconds. You've learned I should never work with students while my hair is down. Okay? Split ends are incredibly distracting, as you saw. You've also probably learned that but where is not a good question. It's not clear, it's not specific. It gets worse when you ask it 5 times in a row. So variety was clearly something I was really good at. Okay, so obviously not the best place, okay? The other part of questioning, though, is thinking about what happens after you ask a question. Okay, so I ask you what your favorite color is. It's pretty obvious what comes next. You wait for an answer, right? And then you go from there. Question, wait, answer. So let's see how that went. Right. Now, we have I am focused on the DNA that is inside your body. Now, what does it do? What's the point of DNA? What does it do for you? Why have it? So you should know what you name. I gotta be the super and Okay, so you've seen again that he's entertaining. You've also seen that wait time, not my best suit. I asked 4 questions in 4 seconds, and he didn't answer any of them. So clearly, not asking good questions, not waiting for an answer, not a great place. Okay. So through my feedback, I was getting a lot of feedback that looked like this. I know you're thinking about it, which AKA means you're thinking but you're not doing it well, about asking these higher order questions. You're starting to work on it, you're starting to incorporate many students, AKA do some work. Okay, so this is kind of where I was. This is feedback from my cooperating teachers who helped me and also things I was thinking about myself. So now I'm in this place and I'm like, crap, what the heck do I do? So where did I go from here? I went where all biology students have gone in this moment, and that was to Jeanette. I vented to Jeanette, I probably cried in front of Jeanette, I got resources from Jeanette, I got tough love from Jeanette, okay? So that's where I started. So then once I did that, I had to take a step back and I had to reflect and think about how do I do this better and not ask stupid questions and not get responses, okay? So I took it kind of back to the basics and kind of forced the issue. So another thing that everyone probably knows about me is I really like would you rathers. And I like asking really deep, stupid questions that no one can answer. And they're all laughing because they know that's true. So I started every single one of my units with an activity that was something related to that. So I, like, in the bottom right corner is a screenshot from a PowerPoint I did that started a pressure unit. So I asked them would you rathers about that. So would you rather, some of them are funny, you can't read them. One of them was like, would you rather drink a bottle of spoiled milk or someone else's sweat? Another one is like, would you rather be pummeled by a herd of elephants or a herd of women in high heels? From a pressure perspective, if you know anything about that, there's a huge difference, kind of a discrepant in that. I also asked students, like, we did a petroleum or not game, we were doing a petroleum unit, so I put up random objects like basketballs, asked them if they were petroleum or not. Stuff that was like, I knew I wouldn't look stupid, hopefully, and it was still a question in the most basic form, okay? So that's where I started. And then I went into scripting. So you can't really see this, but scripting like saved my life in a lot of ways. So this is an excerpt of like 15 minutes of my lesson, and you can see there are 7 questions written there. So now I'm going from wait time overload in my lesson plans, but they're better questions. They're longer than 2 words, and hopefully they make you think a little bit, okay? Now, here's the problem with my presentation is I don't have a video of me getting better, so I just need you to trust me that I got better. I am not perfect, but yeah, I'm better. So let's give me that, okay? So I'm better. But I think questioning is something that I will always be working on. It's something I feel like every teacher is probably still working on, including all the people that have taught us all this stuff. And as a result, you see questioning coming up in my goals over and over, you can't see that, and over again. Literally every single CAF I've done in UTEP, my goal is questioning. So I don't know if that is good proof that I'm getting better or that I'm thinking about it. We're moving in the right direction, okay? So that's my presentation. I told you I'd keep it short. Hopefully that was short. I want to thank the UTEP staff. Obviously, you guys are amazing. Both the people that have taught us, our affinity group, some people who are here today, some people who are not. You guys have been awesome. I see little bits of you in my teaching, and to me, like, that's the ultimate compliment to all of you. So thank you for that. My family and friends, three of which are videotaping me now. So thank you. You know that I love you all and that you've been there. And I'm going to ditto Kavita's comment. I will call you a lot next year. Please answer my phone call. Okay, cohort 11. Okay, slight thing. I almost put cohort 12 on here because you guys know I can never remember what number we are. And then last minute I remembered it. So shout out to cohort 12. You were in my mind. But you guys have been a huge place of support, caring, pushing, annoyance, discomfort, all of that. And that's how it should be. So thank you for all of that. You guys know, you know. My students, I feel like in this moment, it seems really disingenuous to not bring them up. Both my past, present, future students, they teach me more about me than I ever teach them. And you just have to thank them in this moment. In the vein of students, there's one thing that I promised that tutoring student I would do, so I need you to bear with me while I keep my word. So this is our last moment to watch the student, so just take it in.
What is the genetic material?
Yeah, that's the end of my presentation. Thank you. You're free. You're done.
So I'm sorry, you're not free or done. A couple other things I want to say, but I'm gonna go back to this slide. I think that'll be a good one to look at as I make a few closing comments. So thank you all for coming so much. My name is Doug O'Rourke, and I'm the director of UTEP Secondary Program. So it's my privilege. I usually say I have the last word, but then usually the students say something else after me, so it's not actually true. I'm really proud of what we just observed. I think, Jeanette, you can back me up on this or not, but I think what really makes me feel proud is that we've never equipped our students, we never helped our students less on their final presentations. And that sounds like an odd thing to say, but I think the thing is that, you know, they didn't come running to us for help this year, and I think that I'd like to think that that means that the 2 years prior to that equipped them to make the presentations they gave, and I feel very proud of that. And it took less time, you know, so that's good too. Anyway, just kidding. No, honestly, they were wonderful presentations. I was moved over and over again. Aisha, you said you wanted to go first because you knew no one would remember, but I will keep with me, and I'll say more about this later, but I do remember what you had to say, and it meant a lot, as everyone did. I want to finish up by talking a little bit about my staff's problem with practice. And I think right now there's a popular problem with practice, and I think it's something that should be present on everyone's mind that just listen to these, which is the problem with practice publicly for teacher educators is, are these people ready to teach on day one in the fall, right? And for me and my staff, this is sort of, as the outside world sees it, that's what we're supposed to do. You're supposed to be ready, whatever it is, let's see, September 5th is a Saturday, I can figure it out, your first day, it's something like September 9th. And are we doing that? And so to address that question, I have three sort of things I want to say, some final words of wisdom before you finish the program. Advice that I think is related to this problem of practice of whether are you ready on day one and what kind of job did we do. The first two, I'd say, unfortunately sort of contradict what we've taught you in UTEP, so I'm going to apologize in advance for that. Of course, I think the deeper meaning is still connected to what we try to teach you, but I'll leave that to you to judge, because of course you have to construct your own understanding. We can't do it for you. So the first point I wanted to make, first thing I wanted to say is that, and I think it's represented in what you all just said, is that effective urban teachers aren't ideologues. I think there's a lot of times in UTEP where we think, and maybe that's, some people might think by listening to what you said, that there's just one way to do it. And we know the right way, and there are other people out there and they don't know. We have to use cooperative groups. Jeanette taught me I'm doing inquiry at least every other day, or that's what Jeanette was saying to me. And I think one of the things I've learned from you all over the last 2 years is that kind of thinking is dangerous. If you can only be successful with one kind of curriculum, with one particular system for kids, I don't think you're going to make it. I heard a story at a conference a month ago. I have a friend, Jill Pittner, and she was talking about a teacher at a school in a building that initiated the following school-wide practice. Every teacher this is kind of the soccer, everybody's like the World Cup's on your mind. They had red cards and green cards and yellow cards, and they handed them out to students, right? So when you did something good, you got a green card, and when you did, red card, you're gonna stand on the sideline of class. I don't know, you can't play in class tomorrow. And so, of course, this is awful, and I know, my UTEPers, we've taught them so well, they'll come in and they would tell you the 10 things wrong with that practice. Well, Jill knew this teacher at the school, and that's not what that teacher did. What that teacher in her school, in her classroom did, is she saw this policy being instituted by the administrators in the school, and she gave the kids all the green cards, and she said, give them to each other. And they did, and they started internalizing the values. When they gave the green cards out, they said, this is why I'm giving it to you. And it was a beautiful solution for her situation, right, and where she was. So my first point is to remember what we've taught you, but don't be bound by it. Be true to what's sacred to you in teaching, but don't confuse a single way with what's right. So I wanted to say that, and I think it has something to do with whether you'll be ready on day one. Okay, the second, we've been talking about the Danielson framework a lot, and I'm going to tell you is the Danielson framework can't tell you how good of a teacher you are. We use the Danielson framework a lot and keep referring to it. There's planning and there's instruction. I think I can remember them all. There's community and there's professionalism, and we give scores on 1 to 4. Russell's like, I can even, give me a 0.5. I give people 1.75s. We do this sort of thing all the time. You know where you stand, you know your scores, and that's the problem. Can we, and this staff, and I do think it's a terrific staff, can we really actually say whether you're distinguished or not? And sometimes we use this language, like sometimes you visit distinguished, but you don't live there. And I think the problem to me is it's the practice that's distinguished, not you. And it's the practice that's emerging, but not you. Everyday teaching's all over the place. You're emerging and distinguished in a few minutes. So be wary of when assessment slips into evaluation. It's happening in this city some. Teachers are being evaluated by this assessment tool, and it's a really scary thing in my mind. So my second point is the goal of a teacher assessment is to improve your thinking in planning and in real time. That's it. Don't let your kids think, don't you convince your kids they're a number and don't think you're a number. Okay, don't reify this idea of this number. It's just a tool for helping you get better. It's not who you are, and it never will be. So my third point is kind of consistent with what we taught you in UTEP, and that's, my third point I want to make is overcommit in the right way. So I think we've taught you to overcommit, right? So you know that you're supposed to work really hard. And I would just say that, for my coaches, I think we know sort of the trajectory our graduates go in. First of all, your first year, you're overwhelmed. You feel like maybe you don't know what you're doing. Second is you grow steadily. You have your coaches. You gain confidence. But what I want to talk about is this third stage that comes after that. As you grow as a teacher, something else is going to happen. You'll have a club, right? You'll tutor after school. A lot of you will do that right away. Maybe you'll coach a sport. You'll get married, maybe you're already married. You'll volunteer. You'll volunteer for like 18 other things. In other words, what's natural in this third state of teaching is you're going to start to overcommit to a lot of things. And so I just want to put it to you as you graduate, you should start thinking about this now before this has happened, when you're new to your schools and when you haven't overcommitted. Once I often tell people I was once the director of the City of Chicago Math League. And it was kind of being a really slow kid, like running speed. And I was tagged it, and I could never tag anyone else. It was like the only way I stopped being it was stop working for CPS. Everybody's like, Doug, you're doing a great job. I do not want to do that, Doug. You just keep doing it. You're just so good at that. And so once you start doing something as a teacher because you care about the people around you, you just don't stop. And so, I was I couldn't tag anyone. And so this being UTEP, I'm not going to discourage you from overcommitting, but I think the question is, what should you overcommit to? And the answer, I think, is that, and this is not, I think the obvious answer is your children, and I know you'll do that anyway, but I want to say that I want you to overcommit to your own personal development as a teacher, and that's what needs to come first. Form your own inquiry group. It takes leadership and commitment to do that. Okay? Go to conferences, go to lots of them, because it's going to help you, and of course, helping you is going to help your kids. I spent some time in New York City this December learning about their master teacher program, and my dream right now is that one day that we will make a similar program here, and you'll all be part of it, and you all will continue to develop as you're developing now. I want us to overcommit to being great teachers together, and that's something I wanted to say before you graduate. So, my last point is, the day will come when you get comfortable, when you know what you're doing, and make the commitment to keep growing. That's the key. So my problem in practice was, how can we guarantee you'll be ready to teach on day one? And I'm sorry to say that I don't have an answer. I'm not sure I believe this question has an answer. You don't know your children at your schools that are in your future. So you got to be prepared to be flexible, not to be ready. I worry that being ready on day one means you'll be rigid and ideologue, and to me, that's not a vision of effective urban teaching. Secondly, your Danielson ratings aren't numbers to look at and tell you where you are right now. Like, that's not who you are. They aren't a description of who you'll be on day one. But I hope, that the ratings can be a tool so that, on day two, you'll be a teacher who's reflective. And on day three, you'll be a teacher that changes your plan midway because the kids that you have need something different than what you're giving them. And then even maybe by day four, long before Christmas, you might actually smile. So, in my view, my problem of practice, the problem is the problem. We need to change the question. It's not being ready on day one. An effective urban teacher has to have the strength to stick with it, to talk it out, to make a contingency plan, to make plans not for these kids, but for the set of individuals that are your children, your kids. And so, I'd like you to think about that. I'd like you to think about overcommitting to grow for a long time. You've represented a lot of growth here today. I was inspired by it. I'm sure everyone else was too. Everyone else who was here. The problem of practice is how to keep continuously improving just as you have done here. I know your coaches are going to help you with that. I know it's going to happen. Day one will pass. Keep growing. So that's my message to the graduates. I care about you a lot. I care about your growth. I'm really happy to see what I saw today. I want to add a few things before I wrap this up. Secondary staff has been mentioned a lot. I did want to mention that people have been mentioning Tina. Tina had to go to the doctor. I think she's okay, but she did want you to know that she couldn't be here and she wanted to be. We've learned from you, you've learned from us. I was thinking actually as you were talking, what am I most proud of? I'm most proud of my own children. I'm proud that you and people before you were out there teaching in Chicago public schools and we had something to do with it. And I think the third thing that I'm most proud of is that the people that are on my staff, we chose to work together. I think sometimes I've used that language in a way I don't really like I hired you or something. And I'm realizing that I'm glad you chose me, I'm glad I chose you. I'm glad we chose each other and I'm glad we worked together. And I think that I don't need to say much more because the students said it all in what they were able to demonstrate that they learned. you know, Jeanette, you came from a large family, right? And I, you know, we talked about this. I know at one point your brothers like threw you did sort of a circus act. You hated mentioning that, but the point is like Jeanette and I kind of think of you as our children on some level, right? I mean, and when you have a large family, you know, you have to have a way of remembering all the names. I mean, I can look up. I'm not looking at my sheet, and I can say, well, I'm going to start with Aisha, Alex, and Angelo because their names start with A. And then Natasha and Phelan kind of go together for me. And then and they're like in the middle of the biology group, right? And then I need Verdi, Lindsay, and Cara to wrap out, you know, biology. And then I have to say, I think of the men of mathematics. This is the first time we've had all men. But, you know, John, Stu, Russell, and Mike. And I can sort of list all the names. In a way that I think of like I think about a family. And I just want to say personally that I will miss you. I will miss you foremost because I've learned from you. You know, fortunately, I actually have a video of you teaching us. And some people are starting to make a prediction about what this might be. So I thought I would share with you, we've talked about this protocol called Teach Us. And so in fact, they did teach us. And I happen to have, let's see, maybe it won't work. It's going to work. That looks like it's ground. You cannot do this to me. Oh, wait, you know, let's see. Is there a play up here? Oh, this is going to be heartbreaking if I don't get to play it. Mike, you are definitely featured. So, like, I was really, you know, you saw me before the presentations, I was really sort of aggravated with everything going to work. And everything has worked up until, but of course I couldn't put this up because I did not want them to see it right now. Let's see, I'm even losing the math now. All right, try you. And I just want to say that of all the things you could have taught us, John, Dougie meant a lot to me. And, oh, there's more. Everybody needs to see everyone doing Dougie. So I know you thought this group was talented, but I don't think we've really captured it. Now I know Jeanette's going to be irritated. It's like, I always held the camera during Teach Us for exactly this reason. And now I showed Josh this video earlier, and he was like, why is Alex sitting? Texas two-step music up here, it would have been. So why would Alex be sitting? And it's because she had to. And I just want to show that moment of cooperation between Alex. So anyway, sorry. I just had to share that. So to finish up, so like I said, that's probably not the best example of one of the things that you taught us, but it is an example I have video of. But I just want to say in closing, because this group has really meant a lot to me. You know, sometimes you judge the quality of a lesson by the memory it leaves. You know, when you are taught something in such a powerful way that it stays with you forever, you marvel at the teacher you had, and so I will remember you. You will stick with me because those lessons we've experienced together I know I won't forget. And I'm sad that you are leaving, but grateful to have learned from you. Thank you.